I got married to a Funko Pop. Whoa. We got wedded, conjoined in a Subway shop. Whoa. I am married to my Funko Pop. Whoa. We got joined, coitus in a Subway shop. Whoa. Vitamins and biscuits and minerals, they come to me in a tube. My whole life is spent.
What's up, everybody? Welcome. We have with us today the most professional live streamer who just walks off, stands up, plays with dogs on stream. His name is Tristan Haggard, and he's here to discuss a forgotten genre, a genre that's kind of died. We're going to talk about maybe why that genre has essentially died out. It's kind of become the domain of really just leftist propaganda. That's really all that's still going on in this domain for the most part. Every now and then there's a little bit of a gem, but that's the documentary film and the heyday of, and then there he goes. All right, so I guess we'll just call it a night there, since our professional live streamer who does this for a living, believe it or not, actually just walks away consistently from all of his duties in life, really.
Sorry, I just unmuted you. It looked like you finished talking. Are you done?
Yeah, did you also turn the gain up on your mic all the way to sound important and fearful and threatening to the audience?
Is that I mean, that seems like an admission that when I speak, you feel some sort of a power emanating from me that maybe intimidates you.
I mean, if you call manic insanity power, okay, yes. Like, we just don't know what this kind of a dude is going to do next.
Manic insanity. I mean, whatever, man. This is Trump country now, and you know what? Like, you're probably going to be the first person I put in my Project 2025.
Oh, ouch.
Project 2025 concentration camp that I'm building out here in my backyard.
So Trump won the election in Ecuador as well? I didn't know that. Interesting.
Bro, this is a global victory for men.
For the red pill, men's rights, and Tate. Is that who really won last night? Tate?
Yeah, the red pill, us red pill activists. Basically, the plan is to have Trump deport you. Like, I'm gonna figure out a way to get you deported with all the illegals. And I'm gonna see if I can get some sort of maybe private funding through Elon Musk or something to build kind of like a franchise Project 2025 concentration camp. And I'm hoping to house you in it and maybe use you for maybe just harvest you, make you live stream for a few hours.
Well, I was planning to be a cam girl with your friend Tate. What do you think about that?
That sounds good. That sounds really good, actually.
All right.
I think that'll work.
I mean, I am THICC. I have birthing hips, as they say, with triple C thickness.
My wife tells me I have birthing hips.
Right. Your wife is like this, and then you're like this, right? I think that's what you told me.
Physique. So, are you just gonna be chewing food and just rudely eating?
No, this is it's called gum. And
gum. You chew gum.
Yes.
You're calling me unprofessional.
Only as a sign of disrespect to your disrespect. You disrespected my podcast, so you get the gum chewing. Anyway, I've spit the gum out. Are you ready?
Chewing. I thought you were eating, bro. Chewing freaking gum. What an amateur.
So we're going to talk today about the history of documentaries, the heyday of documentaries. I want to say the heyday was around 2005 to 2015. That's where documentaries were popping off. I've listed the good and the bad. We're going to talk about mainstream normie documentaries that were propaganda that we can now look back and kind of laugh at and identify, as well as the alt media sphere. The alt media kind of popped off from things like Alex's documentaries. We'll talk about some of those, and Google Video. A lot of younger folk won't remember Google Video. We're going to talk about some of that today. But let's go back to the late 90s, that era. Tristan, what's the first documentary? It could be fun, it could be normie, it could be conspiracy. Like, what's the first documentary that you remember seeing that kind of stuck out in your mind?
Oh man. Well, when you say, I mean, when you talk about the '90s, I think what was it, Planet Earth or the ocean, that ocean documentary that was always on like Discovery Channel and Animal Planet. Those were huge. I mean, those were massive, and those actually played a big part in kind of forming the ethos and the worldview of millennials in general concerning like the environmental movement.
Yeah.
So I mean, those documentaries, they were beautifully made. The cinematography was amazing, and David Attenborough's voice, right? It all kind of became really iconic. So everything about the aesthetic of those documentaries is very memorable as far as the '90s goes. But I mean, I just remember watching the History Channel for hours on end. The History Channel in the '90s was so funny. I mean, it was mostly like Hitler stuff. It was like all a lot of Nazi stuff. I think in the early 2000s, then it shifted to more ancient aliens, and that really
exactly right
picking up. But I mean, that was kind of like pop culture candy type content. But I think the animal, not Animal Planet, but what is it called? The what was it? Blue Planet.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
The Blue Planet ones were cool because I always loved whales and dolphins and stuff, and kind of grew up around the ocean. So yeah, those were pretty influential to me. And then also I remember when they were releasing, and it was a huge deal when what's it called, Planet Earth came out. But I mean, those were not always overtly propagandistic, but there's consistently kind of this droning undertone in the background about, oh, look at these poor animals. If you guys would just stop having babies, then maybe Mammy Earth will be happy.
Yeah, David Attenborough was always talking about how Mother Nature's cull the populations of the animals. Perhaps we should also cull the population of the humans to help nature live in balance. He was always making those kinds of analogies.
Exactly. So I think those were pretty big, man. I mean, those documentaries, that was like an event when those were coming out. When I think they were released like 9 episodes. They're all an hour long of the Planet Earth documentary. And they had great cinematography, but the underlying message is feel bad. This could exist if you weren't making babies and breathing and using your fossil fuels. The burning of fossil fuels has brought about the destruction of pretty much every type of animal that children love. And if you would just sterilize yourselves and move into a smart city coffin apartment, the beautiful mott birds can do their mating dances in peace without your grubby little Cheeto-covered children's fingers all over their beautiful planet.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. I forgot about the period in the late 90s where the newer cable channels like Discovery Channel, Learning Channel, and History Channel were pretty much constant documentary feeds. That's a great point. And that really kind of got people used to the documentary style, because in the 90s, there were very few documentaries. I don't remember that many being really popular. I remember one of the earliest ones that I sat and watched, all the way through was something like, Bowling for Columbine, and then something to do, like you said, with Tiny Mustache Man on History Channel. I remember watching some of those. I remember watching like a D-Day documentary, Normandy invasion one time, and that's like the extent of what I remember from late 90s. But what stuck out from, and I guess Bowling for Columbine was actually 2002, but
that was big.
It was huge. It was huge, and that was huge. Exactly. Like I think
physically, and then also physically,
exactly, and also massive. He was massive, and probably he still is. But Michael Moore was just such a, and I did watch the one that he made about, what is it, the water in Flint, Michigan. That was his first one that really kind of got him notoriety. You know what I'm talking about? His first documentary was something to do with like
something in me.
Yes, something like that. Yeah, and I remember watching.
What was it about? Was it about the water?
It seemed like the water in Flint, Michigan, or something like that. Is that what it is?
It was water issue in Michigan. You know, I'm looking at the chat right now. Somebody's saying fix audio. I don't know what they mean. Fix audio. I think they want you to tell me to unmute.
You're not muted.
Someone says I'm low. Someone says Tristan. Oh, Roger and Me was the documentary.
Yeah, Roger and Me. That's it. All right, I've raised Tristan up. See if he's better now. Can you hear him now?
We'll see if they continue to complain.
The thing is that he's really loud to me, and just his voice in general just grates on me. So that's why I have to kind of turn him down at times. But anyway, so I think the thing is that with those early, Michael Moore documentaries, they were almost entirely, just the leftist propaganda of their day. I will give one exception to Fahrenheit 451 because there was a little bit of truth in that was kind of surprising. It was almost like he was hinting at the Big 9 event being an inside what. It was kind of the first of those. Maybe Alex had one, right after talking about the Big 9. I'll mention some of those in a little bit, but Fahrenheit 451 was a big deal at the time. People were talking about the Bush Bin Laden connection. That was a big part of that documentary. But, in the case of Moore, it never goes far enough. And if you remember at that time when, Big 9 truth was starting to pop off right after the event in 2002, 3, 4, 5, it was very much seen as a left thing. And the Democratic Party immediately attached themselves to the Big 9 truth movement. Do you remember that, Tristan?
Absolutely. I mean, it was it wasn't really the mainstream Democratic Party, though. It was, the mainstream Democratic Party. Remember the videos of Luke Radowski asking Biden about certain events that happened concerning that? I forget exactly what he asked him, but Biden kind of flipped out on him, gave him some venomous response.
No, you're right. It wasn't mainstream, but it was seen.
But it
was in the domain of left politics.
Yeah, but for me, it was the people that I knew. It was more like left-leaning anarchy, like leftist anarchists. Those types for sure, right? Like they would say, it's that event was an inside job, and a lot of anti-war type people, various anti-war activists and whatnot. Moore's documentaries. I actually, when you proposed this idea, I didn't even think of Michael Moore. I'm glad you mentioned him. But going like the Bowling for Columbine, that was huge. That documentary was another one of these kind of
absolutely
cultural benchmarks for like the left. And it was for those of you who don't remember, for our Zoomer audience, Columbine was like this thing where these two towers got hit with like a paper airplane or something like that, I think. And then like there was like some dudes dancing on a bridge or something. Something happened like that in Columbine.
Muslim Arab men dancing.
Yeah.
To celebrate the fact that Y2K had programmed the towers to fall throughout the simulated matrix. That's what
That's what it was. It was because the computer program on at the end of the year 1999, the computer programs wouldn't work anymore. And so there was kind of this reset. There was like this time warp reset type thing. And then the Columbine event had something to do with airplanes or something. So the Michael Moore documentary that documentary, though, it was really the whole thing was about gun control, right? The whole thing was about removing, we got to rethink the Second Amendment. Well, we should be, having maybe total ban on citizens owning guns or some sort of graduating restrictions.
And do you remember that he interviews Marilyn Manson in it, which is interesting because it was just an odd selection of characters that he chose to interview. And, Marilyn Manson's sitting there trying to sound really profound and kind of sophisticated about how, his satanic music would never promote the ideas of gun violence, and he believes in gun control. It was just so silly.
Did he interview because Eminem was really big at that time too? Remember, it's like the Slim Shady records were out, right? And those were hyper violent, and Eminem would be fantasizing about bloody, gory, violent acts in his songs.
So it looks like it has Dick Clark in it. It has Matt Stone. It has
from Matt Stone from South Park.
Yeah, a couple other people. I don't know who they are, but really Marilyn Manson, I guess, was the big name in that.
Wait, the big one though, the kind of the big moment that everybody was talking about was Charlton Heston. From My Cold Dead Hands guy. Remember Charlton Heston was like...
No, I'm talking about in the documentary though. He doesn't have Charlton Heston in there. You mean he plays the clip to make fun of it, right?
No, in Bowling for Columbine, at the end of the film, doesn't he go to Charlton Heston's house to interview him and gets kicked out?
Oh, I didn't remember. That sounds right. Probably.
I think the peak of the film is the end of it. He goes to Charlton Heston, sits down with him, and I think Charlton Heston basically is like, "Get out of here, you fat, disgusting slob."
Yeah, right.
I don't think he insults him like that.
Did you remember?
Heston was really old at that time too. Heston was like, it was kind of an elder abuse type scenario almost. But in those days, Charlton Heston was one of the big advocates for, Second Amendment rights and all this. I mean, I think he died recently, right?
I don't remember the exact year, but it was not too long after this that he called into Alex. So Heston called into Alex's show a few times back in the 2000s. I remember listening.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, Alex was broadcasting around the time that Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine came out.
Yeah, he was. And Alex was always going off on Michael Moore as just a fat slob and a Democratic Party, shill, and and when Fahrenheit 451, Fahrenheit 9/11 came out, Alex went after it as just kind of a whitewash, and which it kind of was, because it was, basically, it's like almost 9/11 truth, but don't go that far. That's too crazy, right?
Well, speaking of Alex, I'm thinking about around the time 2000, 2001, in around, what was it, 2003? A lot of my friends were into the movie. You and I did a review on it, Waking Life, the Linklater movie. And Alex has a cameo in that. And that's my first exposure to Alex, and how I learned about Alex was from that movie. But yeah, around 2000 to 2001. Now, I don't really remember the Fahrenheit 9 film, like what was it basically? Just
this was a huge deal. I mean, it was probably as big as Bowling for Columbine, because this was Michael Moore's breathtaking expose on the connection between the Bush and Bin Laden families, through the corporate contracts that they had, the companies that they were connected through. I don't really remember all of the details of how far the documentary goes, but
I remember thinking it was a whitewash. I remember thinking this is like
yeah, it's essentially what it is.
Yeah, because what year was that documentary? 2002?
Let me see what year Fahrenheit was.
I'm guessing it was 2003, because I remember when or maybe I didn't watch it until it was long after it had come out. Obviously, I never saw any of these documentaries in the theaters. Growing up in Southern California, I definitely knew, we knew a lot of people who were anti-war, but also in the areas we lived were more conservative, especially at that time.
Okay, so this is 2004. So that would explain, too, why Alex had such kind of a vested dislike, because Alex has already been, by this time, he's already made about 4 or 5, kind of underground documentaries. The first one that's really going to pop off is Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove in 2000. So, this explains kind of Alex. I remember Alex would go off on Michael Moore all the time. Basically just saying he's establishment shill, which turned out, of course, to be correct.
What year did he make the police state documentary? Was that before Bohemian Grove, or was that like
Yeah, so
2002?
let's see. There is Police State 2000, which is the first specifically about the police state, but he had already made in 1998 America Destroyed by Design, which I was going back and watching some of that. It was pretty funny, where Alex is talking about the United Nations and China buying up seaports and Chinese influence, which is interesting. But I don't. Not many people knew about Alex at that because he's really just still local to Texas and doing public access stuff. But after doing Police State 2000, and then after doing, he did another film called very few will remember, called Wake Up or Waco, which is Alex's documentary on the Branch Davidians and David Koresh and all of that. And I remember Alex actually contributed the proceeds to help them rebuild their church after that. That was a huge deal for the Patriot conservative Christian community back at the time, because this was seen as the first real tyrannical move of the federal government against religious organizations. Do you remember how big of a deal Waco was?
No, Waco was huge. I have an uncle. he was in Texas. I remember visiting him. I think it must have been, what year was Waco? 96?
That sounds about right, yeah.
I think it must have been 97 or 98, and we visited my uncle, and I remember he had been involved in the production. I forget what documentary it was. I'm not gonna like name dox him or anything, but he was involved somehow, or one of his friends maybe produced this documentary about Waco, and he was like trying to show us. And my dad didn't care. My dad's like, I don't want to. No. It's like, my dad's like, your uncle's a little crazy, man. He's a little wild. And my uncle was like a trad Catholic. I don't know if he's like SSPX or something, but he was at the time really into the militia movement. He was a lawyer that was involved with a lot of litigation. Some of the stuff that he did had to do with these type of issues. But yeah, that was a big deal, man. The Patriot community back then, which I don't know where those people, like, where is that movement now? It seems like it's been since the Bundy Ranch thing.
That's a good time to date it. That was kind of the end of that idea of the libertarian Ron Paul sovereign citizen prepper type stuff. We still have preppers with us, but Alex was really kind of, during that time period, as well as Ron Paul, pretty much the voice of all of that. And I remember that domain, or that whole time period, very vividly, because I got into Alex in 2002 or 3 through some clips and some broadcasts I'd seen of him, actually on a Tradcat website. I was a Tradcat at the time, and there was a site that had put up some clips about him talking about Skull and Bones, and then that actually led me to Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove. So my initiation to Alex was the Bohemian Grove documentary, and that, even though it came out in 2000, I think I watched it in 2003. And then that led to me watching Loose Change, which, remember E-Bombs World? Everybody used to watch E-Bombs World. And E-Bombs
World, I mean, that was like 90s.
It may have been in the 90s, but this is, for me, E-Bombs World was like 2002-3, and I remember watching.
I'm thinking of like the soundboard E-Bombs World from the 90s, where it was like goofy clips of like goofy audio clips or something.
I mean, E-Bombs World had that stuff, but then E-Bombs World in the 2000s transitioned into a viral, website that you watch whatever's viral that you're watching on your lunch break at work, basically. So they were putting up clips of, remember the Star Wars kid, right? That comes out of the E-Bombs World domain. And I remember one of the clips that was getting really popular was, I didn't know what it was, but it was a clip from Loose Change, and it was the scene where Burmis is explaining, Burmis and Dylan Avery are explaining the Pentagon. And so that was my initiation to Loose Change, which I then found on Google Video, like 2004 or 5, somewhere in there, maybe 2006. But that era of, this was really where you start to see the rise of alternative media documentaries popping off, and it's Alex and Loose Change that really pioneered that.
Well, you and I were talking earlier about the old days of YouTube, right? YouTube was 2005. I remember YouTube came out, and that was my freshman year at college. And I remember, just being in the dorms with my friends and us just finding weird stuff on YouTube and kind of exploring it. I had some friends that would upload to YouTube back in 2005 too, and that was crazy because you had to actually, you had to film on like a mini DV camera and then capture it to your laptop. You had to have Final Cut. Not that many people had Final Cut back then. So then you'd have to edit it and then upload. It was this whole big thing. And
Windows Movie Maker. Do you remember Windows Movie Maker?
Yeah,
it was like the worst. It's terrible quality stuff. This is like 2007, 8 when it's Windows Movie Maker.
So I remember what was really influential back then. David Icke was kind of big on YouTube in 2005, right? Like
yes, he was. That's a good point.
Being introduced of like, oh, you know about David Icke, right? I'm like, no, I don't know David Icke. What is this? Because we were talking about conspiracies and stuff, and I'd grown up. I'll bring this point up later. The UFO stuff was really big in the 90s. It wasn't that mainstream.
That's a good point.
Part of mainstream that was always kind of trying to coax that audience in. And, the UFO psyop has been running for a long time. And in the 90s, there were a ton of books. There were lots of books, a lot of interesting books in the libraries and stuff. So I read Whitley Strieber's book when I was like 10. I shouldn't have read this book. Definitely. I found Whitley Strieber's book. I was just fascinated with, Bigfoot and all this. So when I was a little kid, like 6, 7 years old, whenever I went to the library, I would go to the like unexplained, like the unexplained mysteries type books, Loch Ness Monster and cryptids. That was the most popular stuff in those genres. And then also, of course, UFOs, which is the most terrifying of all those things, is starting to read about these like abduction experiences that people are having. So I was reading about the Betty and Barney Hill stuff when I'm like 10 years old, trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, you beat me on all that. What year you were reading about that in the 90s? Really?
When I was, this was in like 97. So
oh, wow. Okay.
I remember being in 4th grade and I got Whitley Strieber's book and I read that, but I had already read every other book I can find for the last maybe 2 years since like 3rd grade. So I'm 9 years old. Because there were books for young kids about UFOs, but I was a kind of a voracious reader, so I would get books that were, pretty advanced, and so I was kind of reading all the history of Roswell. Like I was really into trying to figure out what happened with the Roswell crash. And there were some documentaries about that stuff in the 90s too.
Yeah, I forgot about aliens. There were alien documentaries in the 90s, UFO. That's a good
remember
point.
The alien autopsy stuff?
Oh yeah, I remember watching Fox when they were advertising for the alien autopsy, and then I remember they had the VHS at the local movie rental store in the 90s. I always thought that was funny. I never believed in aliens even in the 90s, but I did have a phase where when I got pretty deep into conspiracy, the opening doorways of conspiracy through, Bohemian Grove and Loose Change and all that in the early 2000s, I do remember going.
For me, it was the UFO stuff. Yeah, and
I went down that. Yeah, I had a period of reading, what's his name, Stanton Friedman, and I remember reading
Stanton Friedman. Yeah,
I remember reading about Project MJ12, and I read books on abductions and stuff, like you're saying, But I think eventually you kind of realize like the alien stuff is just retarded. You know what I mean? It's just, there's a demonic component to it, but like the rest of it is just stupid. Did you?
Well, in the 2000s it got way out there. In the 90s it was too, but it's retarded. The conclusions people come to are retarded. But I would say it's actually one of the most important things that's been happening. That's why Father Seraphim Rose dedicated such a big portion of it in his book, right? This is something that it's
right. No, I believe in the demonic. I'm just saying, like, did you in your journey when you were reading that stuff in the 90s? Did you continue? Did you actually believe in aliens and EBEs, and did that continue into the 2000s, or did you kind of not believe that anymore?
No, I thought there was something going on, but I wasn't. I wasn't sure. Right, I was aware of Jacques Vallée's theory that like there's some sort of reading Strieber's book. It's clearly like a demonic thing that's going on. Right, when you read this, there's this aspect of psyops and military special operations stuff combined with like psychotronic mind control type situations, ritual trauma. It's like MK Ultra meets cultural engineering, and it is kind of a nexus point of all these weird spooky phenomenon, spooky as far as like intelligence agencies and stuff. But my conclusion at the time, I didn't have a conclusion. It was just, this is one of these crazy things. Whatever this is, like, I knew there was something going on, right? It's like, not all these people are not independently. Some of these people are kooks and they make stuff up. They want attention, right? And some of these people are taking fake pictures, like the famous Hoover vacuum upside down, like
right.
George Adamski, and some of these people are total frauds. A lot of these people are frauds, but there are like pretty undeniable quantity of sightings, especially of those. I remember reading about and there were pictures of some of these too, and a lot of drawings of those black triangle crafts. I actually saw one of those in 2008 or 9 in California. And it just looked like a huge. It was maybe 3-5 times the size of a jet, and it was near a Lockheed Martin facility. So you'd see weird stuff in the sky. But yeah, I mean, when I was a little kid, I never had experiences like that. But it was kind of it would give me nightmares for sure, right? I like to read those scary things and then lay in bed at night, and it would just be kind of like, ooh, what if, you know? You tell yourself those spooky stories, and yeah, it's definitely there's something real there, but then there's also a real cultural and engineering aspect to it of, and this could be, you know, demonic at its core as well, but they want you to be wondering about this. They want it's an intentionally
they intentionally want you
engineered
going down
mystery.
that alien rabbit hole. Exactly.
Which is why they're publishing books for children in the 90s about this, right? They breadcrumbed you into it.
Yeah, and
you think you're being edgy.
a million TV shows and movies too.
Exactly. You think you're like countercultural and, you know, exploring and you know, it is fascinating. To me, I was always interested in kind of the paranormal and the edges of reality, right? Because clearly there's more going on than just, you know, oh, you're all just a bunch of monkeys and you know, just monkeys and bouncing off of monkeys, and the whole world is this cold and deterministic thing, and evolution and all this. But even within the evolution myth, you know, the alien abduction phenomenon, they like to say, well, you know, the aliens are like advanced humans, bro, and you know, if they if you lived a million years in space, dude, your eyes would be so big, and you'd just be like, you just have this big old head. You don't need muscles.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, how do they come to that conclusion that your brain grows and your eyes grow because of space? I mean, it's like,
because you're so smart, dude. Evolution makes you so smart, bro.
And also space makes you smart, right? Space has this quality to make you hella smart. And the further out you go, the higher your IQ, right? So if you're from like distant Pleiades, you got like, you know, mega IQ, right? That's totally logical. It makes perfect sense. Now,
yeah,
two key documentaries that are kind of underground in this period that shook a lot of people. Obviously, you know, we can talk about the Alex stuff, but you mentioned one that has to be recalled, and that is the Franklin coverup, which was the suppressed Discovery Channel documentary about the Franklin scandal and SRA and the abuses at the, you know, highest levels of the GOP back at the Bush Senior White House. And in this, I want to know if you've seen this one. Did you watch back at that time, back in the days of Google Video and whatnot, the Ted Gunderson lectures on the McMartin preschool case?
Oh yeah, of course, Gunderson, man. Those came hand in hand. The Ted Gunderson lectures on the McMartin preschool scandal and the underground, and all the stuff about Michael Aquino.
Yep. The tunnels underneath the preschool, exactly.
Yeah, in the Presidio. Yeah, no, all this stuff was fascinating too, because I lived in that area, right? Like growing up in California and then living kind of the South Bay. This stuff was really freaky, especially because there's so many, you know, yeah, you got the Presidio and you've got, you know, these naval bases and Moffett Airfield, but then you also have all this private stuff too. You know, it's like where I went to university at the very top of the hill in Santa Cruz, past the University of California at Santa Cruz. Jay just leaves. He rage quiz. So I win. I just won. Dude, come on, I won.
No, I went to get the book, which came out at this time related to this stuff. Go ahead.
Nice. No, we show the book again. I want to see the cover.
Right. So around this time, remember this comes out in 2003. I remember buying it when it was new. I was completely, you know, awake to all the, you know, SRA stuff. But this was the first book that came out in about the SRA in the Roman Catholic Church. And so William Kennedy wrote the book Lucifer's Lodge, 2003, and it's the history of the SRA in Rome. So, I've been reading about that for 21 years. So people should realize, we're not noobs to these topics. We've been looking at this for a long time. Like I said, it's one of the first published books on this topic, and it goes along.
It doesn't even. I don't think I ever heard of that book. But just to finish off that one point, like above the university was a giant Lockheed Martin facility, and they had created legal barricades to where you couldn't test the groundwater anywhere around this. Like, you, as a private citizen, if you got a well in your land, you weren't allowed to like test the well water. That's how it worked. So a lot of people were upset about this Lockheed facility. It used to be owned by the Navy, and then it was purchased by Lockheed Martin. But then it also shared land with the church, with LDS, with the Church of Latter-day Saints. And we used to drive up there at night. Like, if you go all the way up Empire Grade, you can see in this valley, and they have a lot of high-tech stuff that they're consistently testing and probing out there at Lockheed. But you could see them doing stuff down in the valley. They had these, I don't know how they were generating so much power to get these, but they had these little orbs of light that would light up over the top of these little cement buildings, and it would start out really small and then just get massive. It looked like some sort of a electric field type stuff. Maybe it had to do with radar, but we would go up there and mess around and get spooked out by cars that would, these trucks would be leaving the Lockheed facility, and the security guards would come ask you what you're doing. It's like, oh, we're just messing around up here. We heard this weird stuff. Is that okay? Like, yeah, just don't don't go any further up. And so, yeah, that was really strange in California, and reading about and learning about the Franklin cover up and then watching the Ted Gunderson interviews all made it that much more spooky to kind of
and this was that phase too of the late 90s and into the 2000s when the internet was not omnipresent. Not everybody was on it. It was a lot more of a kind of a libertarian niche type of thing in terms of these, like, finding these documentaries and finding the stuff, because you would usually find along with it the other documentaries that go along with kind of the the American patriot, sovereign citizen, Ron Paul, libertarian ethos, like critiques of the Fed, right? So you would come across the G. Edward Griffin, Creature from Jekyll Island documentaries. You would find the classic.
You remember the other G. Edward Griffin one about Biden B-17?
Oh no, I forgot about the medical freedom documentaries back then. I forgot about those.
Yeah. That was a big one. I think Griffin made the cancer. I forget, it was something to do with
You're
cancer.
Right. I forgot about that. Exactly. And
I think that was maybe before the Creature from Jekyll Island stuff.
But also we get from G. Edward Griffin the never-ending, perpetual, immortal interview with Yuri Bezmenov, which always makes a comeback on the internet. It never goes away, and we'll probably never see the end of the Yuri Bezmenov clips about the KGB taking over America. But those I
like how it's evergreen. That's the word.
Yeah, but you know what's funny about that one and a couple others on my list, like Angels Don't Play This Harp. That's a classic of the conspiracy domain. Do you remember that?
Yep.
From Nick Begich on harp. So Angels Don't Play This Harp is from 1997. G. Edward Griffin's interview with Bezmenov is actually from 1985. Money Masters by William Still is from 1996. And yet those documentaries got really popular 10 years later, or even 20 years later in the case of Griffin, through Google Video and the rise of the early days of YouTube. So even these older unknown ones can get popular. Exactly. That was actually from the 90s too. That was like a 90s.
Yeah, that was 1994. That documentary was made, and then it was shelved. I don't know if it actually ever premiered on Discovery, but I think it was supposed to air, and they shelved it at the last minute, or maybe it aired once, and then they never showed it again. That only became popular through the internet, and it was really low quality, right? It was like 240p.
It's super blurry, and I mean, you can still find it, but it's always super low quality. Do you remember William Still's Money Masters?
Well, I do remember the name, but I don't remember the content of it. Was it just about the Federal Reserve?
It
checking
was. It
and
was
stuff?
all about that. But Alex used to promote it. But then there was this period where there was a big falling out in the 2000s. I remember this between Still and anybody in the Ron Paul sphere because William Still was not pro gold, and he had these. I don't even remember what his weird views were, but he went after Ron Paul, and that kind of led to the severance of Alex and the Ron Paul sphere from William Still and the Money Masters. But the Money
So what was
Masters.
William Still's?
Money
What
Masters
was
documentary is
his?
still there. Like it's, I just found it on YouTube. It's still got like 200,000 views, and
Yeah.
it's just,
What was his thesis? What would he like to see the money backed with?
I can't remember, but he has this whole like his whole thing was that the Federal Reserve obviously it's fiat and all of that, but gold isn't an answer because the elite control gold, and so there's some other answer. I don't remember what. John Adams said that he was a proponent of a form of fiat. So he didn't like the Fed's fiat, but he had his own view of fiat. And of course, Ron Paul and Alex weren't going to go for that. So
Yeah, well, I think I remember back in those days learning about the gold standard and stuff, and being at first like, yeah, that's what it should be. That's the problem, right? I mean, if we got off the gold standard, that was the big issue. But then, I remember maybe a few months later, I'm thinking, I'm talking 2007, 2008, super
right,
conspiratorial young guy thinking, where it's like, well, then you're just going to put, I mean, the people who have all the gold now, where's all the gold now? Maybe those people are behind the Fed stuff, and they
yeah,
want to just, it's some
that was
Vatican propaganda or
that was
something.
Tarpley's critique. If you remember the era of Tarpley on Alex Jones pretty consistently, that was always Tarpley's critique of Ron Paul. Listen to Ron Paul. He's like Ron Paul wants to pop the bubble. He's a fascist. He's just like the. I was watching the movie Leprechaun. The leprechaun in the horror movie says, "Give me gold." It's Ron Paul, people. That's Ron Paul. That's my Webster Tarpley, by the way. You don't remember? Do you not remember Webster Tarpley?
Barely. I remember. Well, I remember
wow.
the books. What books did he write? He wrote the book.
He wrote actually a really good book on 9/11. 9/11 Synthetic Terror, which is a really good book.
Yeah. Didn't he write a book? Didn't he write the book, the Bush documentary book? George
Yes,
Bush?
he did a thing on the Bushes, and actually he was anti-Obama, and he plays a huge role in Endgame. So actually Tarpley is interviewed for probably about 45 minutes or something crazy in Endgame, Alex's Endgame. Anyway, but
that was a really good one. And what year was that? 2000.
Yeah, so moving up into the later 2000s, we get Endgame in 2007. Loose Change had happened in 2005. And Endgame was really kind of like the documentary that broke Alex kind of into a next level of popularity, because this is like, again, guys, remember, this is the height of like documentaries being popular on the internet from alternative media people. And Loose Change had been a massive hit. In fact, at one point, Loose Change in the 2000s was the most viewed video, I believe, on the internet, and perhaps, I mean, it was at least the most viewed documentary.
On YouTube, yeah.
And on YouTube,
videos were the biggest ones on YouTube.
Exactly.
So, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. And Burmis and them made Loose Change. Burmis was young when he made that.
Yeah,
he was
really young. I mean, he was. I think we were around the same age, so he would have been in his early 20s when he did that. Yeah, and that was a massive hit, and Alex immediately kind of linked up with Burmis. I can't remember if Alex had anything to do with Loose Change, but Alex helped Burmis make the next film, which was fairly significant, and I went back and watched them. It was actually pretty good. Fabled Enemies, which was 2008, which there was actually...
I remember that.
Yeah, Fabled Enemies did well. And then we had this curious thing pop on the scene, which is actually going to set the tone for, unfortunately, where documentary films will go for the next several years, and that is, of course, Zeitgeist. Do you remember when you first heard about and saw Zeitgeist? I do.
Yeah. Would you want me to tell you the story?
Sure.
The myth. No, yeah. Well, first, where did you hear about it?
Well, it was in the sphere, and actually, it was actually from Alex. And so, I remember hearing people in, the libertarian, Ron Paul sphere of stuff talking about Zeitgeist, and Alex was immediately trashing it. and I remember going and watching it, and then I remember right after I watched it, Alex invited Peter Joseph on, and they had this massive debate, and it was fun. It was hilarious because Alex was just screaming at the guy and talking about Jacques Fresco and the UN and how it was all based on putting everybody into basically a technocracy. But yeah, I remember this being a huge, and all of the pothead, like stoner libertarian people loved it because not just the Federal Reserve stuff, but because of all the Jesus stuff. Do you remember this, where Jesus is just like all the other world religions? There's Zeus, and there's like dying and rising gods in every religion, man. And that was there was like this huge anti-Christian component to Zeitgeist, which that
was the whole thing. I mean,
it was Gnostic.
Zeitgeist Part 2 addendum or whatever was all that. And it was Sakaria S. Or that chick?
Sakaria S. Yes, she was like the lesbian. Jesus is the SUN of God, was her view.
Yeah. And it only, so for those of you who haven't watched Zeitgeist, don't bother. It's absolutely retarded. I mean, the first part of it, the parts about 9/11, it's basically just kind of ripping off Burmes's, ripping off of, what's it called? Like loose change, taking some of that stuff, then combining it with like, look what's on the dollar bill type stuff. It's like Nick, it should have been Nick Cage narrating. It should be Jay Dyer and Nick Cage doing Nick Cage narrating, National Treasure style, search for the truth of all the conspiracies in the world. But I first heard about that. I worked as a valet at this kind of nice hotel on the beach in Santa Cruz, and the guys that I worked with, most of them were really cool. All of them were actually really cool guys. Two of them like wanted to be Hollywood writers, and they wanted to be like, basically they thought they're going to be Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and they're like writing scripts together and talking about how they're going to be big actors and stuff, and all. Those guys were hilarious. I'm sure they're probably, they're nice guys, but they were never going to be famous writers or actors. And then this other guy that I worked with, his name was Matt. He was this really little guy, and he had like an older brother or something that would always tell him about crazy stuff. And we were always talking about conspiracies, and I think I'd already seen Loose Change, and I was introduced to a lot of the 9 event truth stuff, even through like music. I remember when I was in high school, we would listen to Immortal Technique, and he ended up.
Oh, I forgot about Immortal Technique. Yeah, the truth or rap phase of like 2008, 9. Yeah, I forgot about him.
No, he was more 2003, 4, 2002,
that early?
3, 4. Yeah, he was.
Well,
early,
maybe I just heard about him for the first time that late.
Yeah, that he got bigger around that time because Loose Change and everything really blew up. I mean, 2005 to 2009, 2010. Well, yeah, I guess like 2010. The whole truth, it was the truth movement, and everyone was talking about getting red pilled and all this. Like that was a big thing. Like, it was a big portion of the internet. A large amount of the stuff that was uploaded to YouTube was concerning this. And they cracked down a lot once Obama got in.
Exactly.
The censorship really started kicking up into high gear. YouTube eventually, the whole model of YouTube changed. I mean, 2014, they brought about monetization. And this basically ended the whole era because monetization favored shorter form content, viral style content, and the attention spans contracted more and more. It's like once they let the boomers on Facebook, that was the start of the end of the world. When boomers were allowed on Facebook, that was the beginning of the end. Then we get monetization on YouTube a few years later. And the reason that people are making, then it became content. You were uploading videos before on YouTube. Then it was content. You're a content creator. And it's about harvesting, the YouTube ad revenue. And back in the day, you could get good money on YouTube ad revenue. Like you could get, if you put a video out and you got 1,000 views in the first 2 weeks, you were hyped. Like that's a crazy amount of views back in the day.
Right.
You would get, they would pay you. You would get good money. You could make a few $100 on a video that's just making, a couple thousand views. And in a month. So YouTube was paying well. Then the whole thing got flooded with so-called content. The attention span shortened and shortened and shortened, and then it was a great excuse for censorship, right? Well, we've got to run ads, and these people aren't
That's a
going to
great
run
point.
ads
Yeah,
on content.
the ad monetization was a big angle exactly for censorship. Great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back to the Zeitgeist thing. Zeitgeist was really big back then, and this guy I worked with, my buddy Matt, was telling me, "Oh, you gotta watch this movie Zeitgeist." Oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Matt. No, there were two guys. There was this guy that was kind of annoying that worked in the restaurant. So there's a restaurant on site at the hotel, and this guy was kind of like he was a what do you call it? He was a busser. He bussed tables and washed dishes. And he and I were always just kind of complaining about shitty jobs. Like, even though my job was cool, I was a valet, and I would make, people would just hand you cash to go park their car. It was a great job. We would still complain about, I'm working for the man, bro. Like, just 9 to 5. Like, this is so crazy. We're wasting our lives doing this stuff. We're, 21 years old. And he's like, you got to watch this documentary. It's called Zeitgeist. So I went and I watched it. And I was, at the time, I was not, I was kind of like believed in something beyond the physical. It wasn't just a total normie, but kind of more leaning towards, like maybe some sort of a deist type thing, or, maybe, I don't know, slightly new.
You were an Instagram yoga chick, basically, before Instagram had yoga.
Yeah, I was a yoga instructor. But yeah, anyways, I learned about Zeitgeist from him, and I watched it. I thought it was kind of corny. I wasn't really convinced. Some of the stuff was interesting. It just what never made sense to me. It was like this whole film is based on the assumption that, the false assumption that the English language and the what do you call it, like homophone style, like the weird English coincidences that occur with the word son of God and the sun. It's like, I knew some Spanish, right? So the sun is sol in Spanish. So it doesn't work. Hijo is son in Spanish, and sol is the sun as far as the sun that shines. So that doesn't work in any language other than English. So that just kind of fell apart for me. Although there was some interesting things about, like, oh, look, it's like the virgin birth, and there's this and that. But even on the internet at the time, there were a lot of kind of debunking. People would debunk. Everyone was debunking everything, right? You had Snopes. So I don't think Snopes debunked.
Yeah, but and at the same time too was kind of the rise of the popularity of Jordan Maxwell, who was using all of those same types of wordplay techniques to try to draw out these ridiculous conspiratorial and metaphysical conclusions based on words being this. The Son of God, S-U-N, is identical to Son of God, S-O-N. Therefore, they are controlled by the Illuminati. And, I mean, like you said, like, I knew enough philosophy and theology and apologetics in the 2000s to be like, this is dumb, dude. What are you talking about? Like, those are two different words. They don't mean the same thing just because they sound phonetically the same. But there was this whole sort of side market of phonetic, conspiracy stuff done by people like Zeitgeist and Jordan Maxwell. I never got into them. I never got into William Cooper either. A lot of old school conspiracy people had this. I always thought that guy was ridiculous and stupid. At
the same time, a friend of mine recommended Bill Cooper's book. Another friend that worked at the same hotel is like, you got to get this book, dude, but you got to be careful, because if you buy this book, you get put on a list. Right?
Yeah, they would say that. I remember people saying that in the time, like in the 2000s, like, dude, if you buy Behold a Pale Horse, you're on a list, dude.
You're on the list, man. You're on the red list.
Jamie's in there cracking up because she was buying conspiracy books in the 2000s too, and so she's in there laughing.
Yeah, no, I legit was kind of worried. I was like, wow, man, how can I get this book? I bought it online too, so I don't know how I did. I'll just use my parents. Have my parents buy.
Your parents' Amazon to buy it.
So that when they come to put them in the FEMA camps, they'll go and I'll just be somewhere else. Later, mom.
Why you're like it's like 2025. Your parents are like aged and decrepit, and they're like, "Why are we being put in the FEMA camp?" And some government goon is like, "Well, we have on record from Lord Bezos that in 1998 you bought Behold a Pale Horse from Amazon, so."
Yeah.
You were on a list that whole
No, but
time.
I liked Bill Cooper back then, man. Bill Cooper was cool. He when you read Behold a Pale Horse, there's sections of it about alien stuff, but he kind of did a good retcon on that, and he says in his lectures, he's like, no, he's like, I'm 100%. I think he wrote this in the book too.
I think so. I know he had a change, right? He changed his position.
Well, he says he's like, I think they were. He says I think they were feeding me a lot of fake documents to just make me,
yeah, I've heard
to try to. He's like, I think a lot of the stuff that came across my desk were intentional disinformation that for the purpose of possibly discrediting me. So that was his cope of why he, when he wrote that stuff about the aliens. But apart from the alien stuff, the Behold a Pale Horse book was pretty eye-opening and interesting, and at least opened the door to start researching some of these other weird things. I mean, and the death was it was very suspect what happened with his death.
Well, there was accusations at the time that because he had called out Alex and said Alex was fake, that Alex had Bill Cooper assassinated. It was just so stupid. I just thought it was all so stupid at the time.
They had a big thing. Yeah, Cooper hated Alex. He was always saying how Alex is a shill. He's
also at this around this time too, in the early to mid 2000s. We're actually moving into the later 2000s, but this was the beginning of the theory that Alex is Bill Cooper. I mean, is Bill Hicks, which has always been ridiculous, because I remember I used to watch Bill Hicks do Evening at the Improv and whatnot in the late 80s and into the 90s, and this was around the time when you see the picture of Alex from high school when he's like buff Alex, that old 90s picture of like super buff Alex Jones when he's like
here you go, Jay, trying to cover for his freaking his big money Alex here. He's
right,
to cover up.
I got to cover up for the conspiracy.
Jay trying to cover
but
up.
So we're supposed to believe that like this 18-year-old dude, right, who's like buff at the time of the early 90s, the same time is Bill Hicks, who was like still fat, cigarette smoking, beer swilling, stand-up comedian who's like 40, yeah. Right? Another reason people have this dumb theory is because Bill Hicks was doing activism about Waco, and he might even be in Wake Up or Waco at one section. I can't remember, but
yeah. Well, they did have overlap too, because who was his videographer? Hicks's close friend. What was his name? Hicks had a really close friend that was.
I forget.
That also knew Alex.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
So they knew each other. They actually knew each other. But yeah, Hicks. The timeline doesn't add up. If Hicks was Alex, and you see Alex now, he looks healthier. Like he's starting to get in shape and stuff. I saw that picture of him the other day. He posted. He looks younger. He looks like he's not drinking so much, and he's lost quite a bit of weight. He's lifting again. So yeah, he looks like around the age that Bill Hicks looked when Bill Hicks died. Supposedly died. Whatever. I mean, I hope my check's in the mail, Jay. You better pay me well.
It's funny looking back on a lot of these 2000s era conspiracies and how dumb so many of them were. But also around this time was a big one that popped off with Aaron Russo, Freedom to Fascism, which called attention to the Federal Reserve and to plans that that the elite had. And actually, I clipped that section about feminism and put it on Twitter a while back, and it got quite a bit of views, because there's about a 2-minute section where Aaron Russo talks about the Rockefellers' designs for the feminist movement and why they supported it. And that's kind of a gem that will always be, I think, popular from that documentary. But that's most of...
That was the best part of the documentary. Now, whatever happened, because part of the thesis of the documentary is he was saying that he talked about he talked about getting chipped. It was like, everybody's gonna have
yeah, exactly, the microchips. I forgot that. That's a key part of that documentary.
That was the big one. I think that was the most alarming part of it. That's the end game.
Now, a couple more normie bad documentaries, propaganda, wicked documentaries from this time period. Not too long after Bowling for Columbine, we get a few years later, An Inconvenient Truth, which is massive. I mean, it really did its job to convince so many people. Remember the hockey stick graph and how and it was so big because of the polar bear was going to drown floating on the iceberg, and I mean it was just massive.
Tearjerker moment of the polar bear on the iceberg, but dude, polar bears swim. That polar bear got on that iceberg intentionally. They do that all the time.
My German professor in undergrad, so this comes out when I'm taking German class, she makes us watch Inconvenient Truth and write an essay on it. And I remember writing, like, first of all, what does this have to do with a German class? I mean, it's just, I mean, no, she's just like, it's just the way college operates, where it's like, you're taking German and they want you to watch this Al Gore propaganda movie, right? It makes no sense, but that's just how education is, right?
I don't know if I ever watched it, but yeah, they were showing it in schools.
Yeah.
I mean, it was huge, man. And there was so much misinformation and fraudulent information in that. And then you remember the IPCC scandal, the Climate Gate scandal that happened.
Yep, because Alex popped when they busted that as a scam. Alex popped champagne on there. I remember that.
Yeah, and that's been forgotten. Why does nobody talk about that anymore? Like, to me, that was such a huge thing. In 2007, the International Panel on Climate Change at the UN was caught defrauding the world in order to stoke fear and tell you that the world's ending. I mean, this was I don't know. It actually reminds me of what the media did recently with, like, Trump's a Nazi, like Project 2025. Everyone freaked out about this thing that's like, that's not real. But yeah, I mean, we're still dealing with the repercussions of this, and it's coming, man. The next year or two, they're for sure going to revamp the whole, climate.
Oh yeah,
terrorizing people with climate stuff. Because that's
never going away. That'll never go away.
No, it's here, man. I mean, you got this huge drought in South America right now, and like blackouts. I mean, we have like 12. We had 14. It was 14 hours, 14-hour blackouts last week, 2 weeks ago, and it's coming back. Yeah, now we have 6 hours a day without electricity, and it's not due to climate change, right? But the narrative that the kind of neoliberal U.S. puppet government that's only living off of IMF money, that their narrative is, well, this is because of unforeseen climate change, right?
Right.
They're drought cycles that happen all the time, and here we have reliance. A big part of the energy grid is powered through hydroelectric generation. So you got these big dams that will, create these reservoirs of water, and then that water goes through these turbines and generates tons of electricity for the country here. And then there are also some of them that are on flatter rivers where there's less of a pitch and not a drop off, where they don't have an embalse and where they don't have a catchment, and it's just a free flow of water that goes through these turbines and generates electricity, right? These were all built. Most of these were built by the Correa administration, which left in 2017. But there's also backup power of like thermoelectric generation, like thermal plants, which is just giant diesel generators that you burn diesel, or you can burn natural gas and create electricity. Well, the neoliberal regime that came in here like 7 years ago just gutted the state, right? This is what they do. So you've got billions of dollars worth of equipment that's rotting because they're not upkeeping it. They're not fixing these motors, right? And they want to blame it. They're saying, "Oh no, it's because the previous, they didn't finish building these hydroelectric dams. The dams are bad. We don't like what he did, what Correa did to actually build all the infrastructure in this country. We want to privatize everything, right? Because Correa nationalized oil. He was kind of on the naughty list of the U.S. for a long time. He was not like a Gaddafi level character, but he was not in friendly relations with the U.S. State Department. Anyways, what they've done is just let it all go to shit. They've let all of the infrastructure rot. They haven't done any maintenance on the hydroelectric generation plants, and they haven't kept with the long-term plan that Correa developed and his administration had to increase the production of electricity to meet the new demand, because there's always more demand for electricity, right? Like, look at everybody with their devices now. This growing population, you need more electrical generation for the grid to handle it. But anyways, you go through a drought, and these same drought cycles happen every like 60 years or so. You get a big drought where it might be 3-4 years where you're not getting lots of rain in these areas, and then you don't have enough electricity. But they're going to say, no, it's climate change, right? So now in Ecuador, that's climate change, and the government's completely broke. They took $500 million. The president took $500 million from the SELEC, which is this like the state electrical company, and he paid the IMF with that instead of doing maintenance on the power grid. Now there's blackouts of 14 hours, but the IMF releases a statement congratulating Ecuador on lowering their investment risk because they paid the IMF with the money that should have been used to fix the freaking country. It's like the perpetual cycle in South America.
Yeah,
Anyways,
debt control.
but now they're saying, well, it's because of climate change. And the president the other day just announced, because there's an election coming up, and he's gonna lose. He's gonna get destroyed, like Kamala level destruction. He says we're gonna give $400 a month, which is a lot of money in Ecuador, to youths who are gonna participate in climate action. And so he's gonna get $400 a month for the next 3 months, which is right before the election. He's trying to buy votes, and he's using IMF money to just give out $400 and they're not going to do anything. They're going to say like, oh yeah, we're doing climate action, but I'm pretty sure that this is just part of the secret, that you have hidden loan conditions with the IMF, and part of that is to like invest in climate change resilience programs and stuff. So they're probably going to have these kids, go around, and I don't know what they'll have them do, but they'll get $400 a month to fight climate change in a country that has no electricity for 14 hours a day because because it's supposedly broke and it doesn't have money to fix the electrical grid. But it's climate change, right? And you can just keep doing this scam. You de-electrify all these third world countries. You remove their ability to use what they call fossil fuels, which is all a huge scam too.
Right.
And then you blame it on climate change. Oh, look, we gotta stop using cars. You can't have cars. We gotta make the price of gas higher because of climate change. And yeah, so you can thank Al Gore and the Inconvenient Truth and all the billions of dollars of marketing and Madison Avenue brainwashing for this kind of cultural climate that allows us to be in this perpetual state of terror and trepidation, that the weather, which is never supposed to change.
Yeah,
right?
well, every time you fart, you're basically causing hurricanes.
Yeah.
And so humans shouldn't exist, and then we'll have peaceful, sunny days.
Exactly.
Now, a couple more big ones from the 2000s before we leave that era of the 2000s in the normie sphere. One of these actually kind of overlap into the alternative media sphere. Super Size Me, 2004, and Adam Curtis's Century of the Self and Power of Nightmares. Those end up being huge documentaries that actually continue to have steam into the 2010s. Because if you guys remember, it was about 2017, I'll never forget this, when Kanye tweeted out about Century of the Self, and people kind of sensed, hey, Kanye's on some kind of a journey here. But one of the documentaries that he watched was Curtis's Century of the Self. Did you find either Super Size Me or Century of the Self to be impactful?
I didn't see them until later. I didn't see them until maybe 2011 or 12.
That's probably around the time I saw him.
What was the other one he made? There was Century of the Self, and then Adam Curtis was like
Power of Nightmares. There's another one, Hyper or something. Yeah.
I thought the hypernormalization, that was an interesting. I mean, the concepts are interesting, but it kind of had this almost like neoliberal assumption underneath it of like, it's like this the Russians that are doing all this stuff.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, as Century of the Self, I remember enjoying it. I mean, isn't it a few hours long? Like, it's a pretty in-depth.
3 to 4 hours long for sure.
Yeah, I really like that. I enjoy when they put in the energy and the time where you got to kind of watch it in chunks. that's missing now. Like, you don't have that anymore. You know, it's the attention span is fried. All of our minds are fried. Nobody can do it anymore.
Also, towards the end of the 2000s is the beginning of John Taylor Gatto's materials being promoted, particularly by Richard over at Tragedy and Hope. And, you know, the whole sphere of education and the homeschooling. Remember Brett Veinott's podcast, School Sucks podcast, was pretty popular in the alternative media sphere for many years. So this is around the 2008 to 2012 period. Lesser known documentaries from that period. Truth Rising, I'll never forget that because Alex played the ad for Truth Rising so many times, and it had Luke confronting Brzezinski. And, you know, Luke asked, I'll never forget it because I've heard it so many times. Luke asked the question about the big nine, and Brzezinski goes, "Sit down and shut up," because he's, you know, had these Z's. "Sit down and shut up." And then Luke asking Bill Clinton famously, and Clinton going, "How dare you? How dare you?" That was his response to Luke.
That was amazing. Dude, that was the best era. The We Are Change. That was the best. They were yeah, that's crazy. I mean, Jason Burmas, Luke Radowski.
It was pretty wild. Like, I mean, Luke had balls of steel, man. I mean, I would have been scared to go up to, you know, Rockefeller and all these characters and ask these questions. But
no, it was so inspiring. But it was like it kind of it synced up a lot with kind of the like 90s punk kid vibe. You know, it was kind of this. It was like this rebellious, you know, buck the system. Like, we know the system's corrupt, and then it took it to this other level of like, we're gonna confront on camera these people, and he was coming in armed with not just like balls, but he would ask them really cutting questions.
Yeah, no, he had the best sort of get down to the point, you know, why are you funding this if, you know, blah, blah, blah. How dare you, you know.
Now, I forgot that, I mean, Luke was involved in Loose Change, right? Like,
Luke started Loose Change with that other guy. But Truth Rising was a We Are Change in partnership with Alex documentary, because Alex would kind of make and produce these documentaries with Burmas, with Richard Grove, because they end up making.
He would buy them, right? Then he would like he
would help because he had an audience, right? So he would help push it out. But there's also the Richard Grove Alex documentary. We'll get into that in the 2010s. Not Minds of Men. That's Melissa and Aaron's, but State of Mind, which was good too. Minds of Men's great. State of Mind is forgotten too, but that's Richard and Alex's production. But yeah, Truth Rising was Alex and Luke. And then before we leave the 2000s, people are asking about Loose Change. Of course, we mentioned the Loose Change was the first thing we talked about. Maybe you guys just got here, but we've already covered essentially all of the 2000s era, you know, key documentaries that stick out. There is one remaining. There's a couple obscure remaining ones from around 2008, 9, 10. Before we leave the 2000s, we have to mention the biggest of that period probably would be Obama Deception. I mean, obviously Loose Change is up there, but Obama Deception was massive. This is where Alex really broke into the mainstream. Fox News is talking about it. Alex goes on Fox and different things. This is probably around the time of the Piers Morgan video. And Alex goes viral through yelling at Piers Morgan about 1776. And do you? I mean, Obama Deception was just so massive. Man. It took Alex to the next level. I mean, it was the next level.
Well, Alex was he was on a tear at the time too. I think he was at like peak Alex manicness. You know, like he was so intense and he was so. I mean,
yeah.
I just remember he went so far with some of it that a lot of people were just like, dude, this guy, like, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah, some people were mad about the Piers Morgan thing. Made people mad. Yeah, not everybody.
Yeah,
a lot of people loved it.
The truth movement. I was mad at the Piers Morgan thing. It was just like, this guy. People were postulating that he wanted to try to make everybody look bad, and that's why he was doing this stuff. You know, like Piers Morgan and just freaking out. So a lot of people were upset. They're like, this is bad optics. It makes us all look like kooks. It makes it makes the pro gun control people think we're unhinged. So that was I remember.
I didn't dislike it. I always thought it was like intentional sort of character showmanship, and it was theatrics. And I thought, I mean, that's just what Alex always does.
Well, I
So
think I just being young at the time too, and just being so jaded by the whole, even within the whole like truth movement thing, seeing people that were really sketchy. And I mean, anybody who gets involved in, 2007, 2009, 2010 era in like local politics, you start to see that corruption, infiltration, and just weird, shady stuff happens even at the local level in small towns, like in places like California. I remember, we had somebody that was trying to get a libertarian trying to get elected to city council, and just seeing how conniving and fake the whole election process is. Like you can't even run as an independent. So then she had to register as a Republican and try to run as a Republican. So then you had to get people to register as Republicans to actually vote to actually get her on the ballot even. So all this stuff was just so ridiculous. But then you also, I remember seeing, we'd have these libertarian like type meetings. We're trying to get rid of smart meters and, make sure that, because they're always trying to push for fluoride in the water too in Santa Cruz County where we live. So we'd have to constantly be pushing back against them trying to put fluoride in the water. And you go to these meetings and there'd be like 50, 100 people there. But then guys would start showing up. Like there was this Clinton operative that would show up in a small place, medium-sized place in Santa Cruz. And he would show up and he'd smell like brandy. This guy was a total drunk. And he actually worked for Bill Clinton, was in the White House with Bill Clinton. I forget this douchebag's name. This guy was awful though. And he would always cause a scene. Anytime there was like, after we watched like Aaron Russo's Freedom to Fascism. And at the end of it, he would be half drunk, reeked of alcohol, but didn't act super drunk. So you could tell he's like a functional alcoholic, right? And he would just start ranting about nothing and just start wasting people's time and trying to argue with people about petty stuff and redirect the conversation into useless avenues. And I just remember seeing stuff like this and thinking like, man, if this guy's not a Fed, he openly worked for Bill Clinton. He has no reason to be here. He's completely ideologically opposed to everything we're doing. And every time he comes in here, he's trying to get people's names. He's trying to get people to say things. It was very strange. So seeing stuff like that at the time made me also super paranoid about, anybody that had a big following. It's like, oh, wow, there's so much infiltration at the small level. Therefore, who knows what's going on at like the national media level.
I think everybody has that kind of phase too, in some degree, where you kind of, as you go through experiencing and learning all these things, you have that phase where you like UFOs and the kind of out there stuff, and then you kind of go through everything's part of the conspiracy and everybody's an agent. Yeah. And you have that thought process as well.
And the Obama deception era, that for me, it was a little bit of that because I was maybe 24 years old, 23, still young and just kind of just overwhelmed by all the stuff, right? You learn all this stuff in a short period of time. And then you start trying to take action and you're just kind of hitting your head against the wall sometimes. And it's like, well, why do you even care about convincing people about some of these things too?
Yeah.
And then you start hanging out with people in that same sphere and everybody's got their own little pet obsession, right? You got the guy that's obsessed with the Jesuits, the guy that's obsessed with the other Jays.
No, it was very much that way in the 2000s. There were like these niches and it was like, everything was that group and you had to believe that, to kind of be in that niche. It was very factional, I guess you could say. And really the only broad appeal at this time was Ron Paul related. I mean, Ron Paul is really the focal point for a lot of this stuff throughout the 2000s, and lesser so Alex, because Alex was seen as the conspiracy theorist, the king of conspiracy.
But Alex was also like one of my favorites at the time too. He was, I would listen to him all the time. From the time I heard of him, I think my grandma actually told me about him back in like 2006 or so. She used to listen to him too. But she was really paranoid too. My grandma, she's like, Alex Jones, he's a Judas goat. She had read Michael Collins Piper's book about the Judas goats, like the fake right wing infiltrators and such like that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That
I have his book on the JFK stuff. But I didn't never
Yeah,
get
it's
into
good.
other others.
Final Judgment was pretty good though. He had some good stuff.
Right. No, it is pretty good. I just didn't get it. I never got into the other stuff from Michael Collins Piper, but I remember that era. And I remember I used to read the Spotlight. I would go to, Jim Tucker Spotlight website, read that pretty consistently. And if I remember, isn't it a big part of Endgame that Alex is it Chantilly, Virginia, Bilderberg that year? And I think he interviews Jim Tucker and I think Daniel Esselin. Aren't they also in
Excellent. Yeah. We had talked about like last month when we did that stream. We talked about doing his book on Tavistock, right? And there's another new book on Tavistock by Coleman, and Estelin had a didn't Estelin have a
Well, Esselin's book summarizes Coleman's book, but Coleman's book is old, but now it's reprinted. You can buy it again.
Okay. Yeah, man. And there was also Anthony J. Hilder.
Oh, that's Hilder's documentary. I remember having an impact on me. This is around 2009 or 10 when I saw it. It might be a little bit earlier, but it's Illuminati and the New World Order featuring Anthony J. Hilder, David Icke, and Jordan Maxwell. That one was a very popular documentary. I remember that. That was the first time I remember hearing the idea, because it was David Icke was saying, in these rituals, the elite are tapping into realities outside of 5 sense reality. He was talking about the satanic rituals, and they tap into these energies. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. Was in that documentary.
Well, I remember also, Ike's Credo Mutua interview is like 3 or 4 hours long, talking about, the shamans and cryptids, and tying that in with interdimensional demonic stuff. And then somehow tying that in with no, they're actually physical shape-shifting reptiles. That was a really funny time too. I don't know what year that came out, but I saw it maybe in 2007.
Yeah, I still have my David Icke books, but I would here and there pick up at used bookstores, what's the Biggest Secret, all those old school Icke books.
Yeah, my grandma sent me that. My grandma liked David Icke. That was...
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's super crazy.
Your grandma? What the heck?
My grandma, man. Yeah, she was super into David Icke. I
believe in these Cheetah Ori. Tristan, I believe in these Cheetah Ori.
She had all these. She would buy every book. She would buy so many books. She was not well off too. She was like not financially well off. She should have been buying so many books. And she signed up for was it American Free Press, that the newspaper thing, and then she would always order the books that were like at the end of the catalog.
Yes. Was that American Free Press? Was that connected to Spotlight and Jim Tucker? American Free Press?
I think so. Separate? I think it may have been. I mean, it was kind of like, it was conspiracy stuff combined with patriot type stuff.
Yes.
And it was, you get on a list. You're on the list, man. You buy that magazine, you're on that list. You're going to have a red dot on your mailbox, and that means that when FEMA comes through, you're going to the you're going out the outdoors.
Right. PatCon, right? The Patriot conservative PatCon stuff.
I still have to read Whitney Painter's book. Do you have Whitney Painter's book?
Whitney Painter? Who's that?
Well, you said PatCon, right?
Yeah, no, I've not read a book on it. I just remember that. I mean, I'm familiar with that domain because I've read critiques of that sphere of stuff. For example, Tarpley used to critique it pretty heavily, and he would talk about the funding and the people behind it. Alan Watt, for years and years and years, would go after the PatCon people and Beau Gritz and all the kind of the fake, sovereign citizen people throughout that whole bunch of fakery. But there's several characters in that.
The Secret Lives of Timothy McVeigh.
Okay, yeah, and that overlaps with
big, man.
What we're talking about, right?
Yeah. I mean, PatCon stuff, and it's talking about the '90s and the Patriot movement and infiltration from
Christian identity. Yeah, they use
Christian identity and I guess the writer, there's this a great series of interviews with her, and I was like, I got to get her book and read it, but I haven't read it yet. But she talks about she's really into like Thomas Pynchon and stuff too. So I think she's got like kind of Pynchon-esque writing style. But the story is crazy, man. Like when you really look into the McVeigh stuff and what happened with OKC,
Well,
it's absolute madness.
I was going to say also as we begin to leave the 2000s, the 2000s, one of the big ones right on the cusp there is Noble Lie, the famous documentary about OKC. And not too long after that, maybe 2014, we also get the rise in the alternative media sphere of Corbett. And I think Corbett did a lot to really try to at least substantiate all of the so-called conspiracy stuff and ground it in real world, proofs. And he did really good with a lot of he did a big oil series and documentary. I remember that being really powerful. He was way ahead of the times when it came to a lot of the tech stuff. And I'm not trying to diss Corbett. Maybe he's still putting out information I haven't really kept up. But
I think he got kicked off YouTube, and it's right. It's hard to find people after that.
Yeah, but
I think he aligned himself with like Mark Passio and some of those retards.
Well, the other thing that Corbett did was he was one of the first to have these bite-sized things go viral about things like the Big 9 event. So you'd had loose change and that kind of stuff, but Corbett was churning out stuff about the Big 9 that would go viral on the regular, and that's actually, if I recall, what ended up getting him booted from various platforms. But he also put out a thing on McVeigh, which was really well done about the Black Ops usage of McVeigh. It may tie into what that book you're talking about. Did you ever see?
No, it's so crazy. I mean, there's stuff. There's dentists. There's always dentists.
Yeah.
Always dentists.
Did you ever see Corbett's thing on McVeigh? It's really good.
Did he talk about the dental work, about his dental records and his medical records?
I don't remember. I just remember him going into a lot of depth about sheep dipping and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh no, man, he's surrounded. There's so many weird people surrounding him. It gets really crazy. There are all these like cult figures that have connections all over. Yeah. I've got to read Aberration now. I got it on my desk. It will be read.
Now, in my analysis, there's a couple more from the 2000s before in the normie sphere before we get into the 2010s. Did you ever watch Food Inc. or Aliens of the Deep from Cameron? I remember Aliens of the Deep was a big thing.
Yeah, Food Inc. What year was Food Inc.?
Food Inc. is 2008.
Yeah, I remember Food Inc. And I mean, Food Inc. I think it just came down to like, well, everything's basically corn and soy, and it's all GMO. I think that was Food Inc.
Yeah. And then, did you ever see Cameron's Aliens of the Deep, which you think the reason that was so remember when James Cameron had made a big deal in 2000s about he had put all this money into this craft that was able to go deeper in the oceans than anyone else had ever been.
Oh, and so the whole Titanic. Yeah, he got obsessed with that after Titanic. Yeah,
and so the whole documentary is supposed to be. I remember watching it when it came out. It was a big deal. It's like all of these weird sea creatures no one's ever seen because James Cameron went deeper than anybody else. Remember, that was the whole thing. But what the reason it's called Aliens from the Deep, believe it or not, if I recall, it was actually trying to shoehorn in alien stuff. It's like you have a hard time believing in aliens. Look at these weird ass sea creatures. There's probably aliens. that's like where he's going with it.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a shitty business model. It's like you're basically relying on the assumption that your audience is going to be stoned enough to get in that mind. Whoa, dude! Every creature is like an alien. Have you seen a praying mantis, dude?
But no, it's like these undersea creatures that all look kind of like aliens. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, bro. But if you ever look through a microscope, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't that look like a freaking alien, bro? It's like it looks like aliens. So like probably there are aliens,
bro. If you like smoke enough OG Kush and you just get really really close to a beetle, bro, or like an ant. They're aliens, dude. Have you seen their eyes? Their eyes are so big, dude. They're freaking aliens, bro.
Exactly. That's if I remember, and I haven't seen Aliens from the Deep since it came out, but That's what I remember. And I remember not too long after this is when James Cameron goes on to working with NASA and promoting a bunch of like NASA crap and, you know, Mars. Literal alien bull crap.
And but then what's funny is he fell off so hard that he made the gayest documentary ever made, The Game Changers, like 20.
Well, hold on, save Game Changers. We're gonna get to. I've got it on the list. Don't worry, but we're not to 20. We're not to 2018 yet. We're almost there. What?
I'm just laughing at the chat. So it's like, Jamie, pack us a bowl.
we're gonna decide if aliens exist watching these James Cameron documentaries about the ocean. Let's see. Okay, we're into the 20. Now here's the bad part about the 2010s. In my opinion, my analysis, this is where documentaries begin to go down the route of the New Age bullcrap, and pretty much being completely shifting towards leftism. Alex doesn't really go for documentaries anymore. He's built up enough of an audience that he's not really doing big documentaries. By 2016, we get Trump. Alex is full on board with Trump. So there's not really Alex types making documentaries. Burmis does continue. Burmis makes Shadow whatever Masters, I forget the name of it. He makes a couple more.
Yeah.
There are some good documentaries though in the 2010s that stick out in my mind. One of which is Mirage Men, and for me, Mirage Men really settled any latent doubts that I had about the Black Ops side of the alien phenomena. I think Mirage Men really, if you pay attention,
highly recommended
really
documentary. Mirage Men is great.
Another big one is Open Secret. So 2014, we get the first major PEDO expose of Hollywood, Open Secret. That was a huge deal. A lot of people talking about it, a lot of attention, a lot of buzz, and a lot of censorship and shutting down. So we know there's something big. Do you remember Open Secret when that was everybody was talking about that?
Yeah, no, I don't think I ever actually saw it. But I do remember it. What was the?
You should watch it because they go into quite a few pretty big name Hollywood people at the time. It's worth watching.
Maybe I did see it. Well,
I mean, they spent a lot of time on like Bryan Singer and people like that.
Okay, yeah, no, I saw Open Secret. Well, wasn't there another one after that?
There's one called that was about Rome called I think Spotlight, but Spotlight was like liberal media made, so. I'm not saying that it's not telling the truth, but the Catholics poo-pooed it and didn't pay attention because it's like, oh, this is being made by the liberal Boston media or whatever, so we don't have to pay attention to this. And so it's just liberal as if there's not actual SRA going on in the Catholic Church. So Spotlight didn't have as much of an effect as I think they had hoped it would, but probably not many of these documentaries at all really did. I mean, most documentaries don't have a huge effect. I mean, people like you and I remember them and they impact us, but they don't change the world, really. You know what I mean?
Well, now documentaries do nothing, and I think
it's dead now. They're dead now.
Yeah, no, it was. There was a time when there was less stuff on the internet, when there was less video content. Now it's just infinite. You have infinite content. It is infinitely multiplying, and people make stuff just to make stuff. So there's no artistry to making a video and posting it on the internet anymore. And even longer form videos, like 20-minute video essays or something that some of these guys will make, there's still good stuff out there. But if you want to be doing stuff like that, you still have to be making one every 2 weeks or one every month. So you don't have time to make 90-minute or 2.5 hour documentary like you would have back in the day. Back in the day, you could make a documentary like that and then promote it for a year, and it would be relevant for a whole year. But with the way that the algorithms are designed and the way that people's attention span has been fried by the algorithms,
right?
And the way that monetization is incentivized pumping out useless content, it's not worth it. So you're better off you can't spend time on projects like that anymore. It doesn't make sense monetarily, and it doesn't make sense with the flow of information and with the news cycle, right? Like, it's too fast now.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird because everything has completely changed since even the 2010s. It's not at all like it was. That's a really insightful point. A couple other documentaries that I remember sticking out from the 2010s that were pretty important that they may be earlier, but I saw them in the 2010s. Great documentary, Light Bulb Conspiracy. It's a classic. Have you seen it?
Oh, I don't think I saw that one, but is it about how the light bulbs are used to last forever?
Yeah, essentially it's about planned obsolescence. Really,
Yeah.
really good documentary. It's a classic. Everybody should see that one.
Yeah, that's for real. That's
Minds
so
of
annoying. And
Minds
now,
of Men. Yeah.
well, yeah, Minds of Men. Minds of Men was great. It was long. It was like 4 hours long, which I like that. I like that, when somebody's gonna put the time into making a documentary that's really dense with information. I mean, it was like a book in documentary form, basically, which is, I
Yeah.
appreciate the work they put into that.
Yeah, I remember we got invited to the premiere. We were friends with Aaron and Melissa at the time, and went to Austin and hung out with all the Boiler Room crew, and went to the Alamo Draft House and watched the premiere there. Had a lot of fun, and it was a great documentary. A lot of great information. Also during this time period, I remember this being a huge deal. Everybody talked about it. I didn't watch it. I didn't think it was going to be that interesting. But did you watch Oliver Stone's America series, where he contrasted America and the Soviet Union? This was a huge documentary series, maybe 3 parts. I remember everybody talking about this at the time. Did you watch it?
No, I actually don't remember that. Last thing I saw from Stone was his the Putin interviews.
There's that, but
Yeah.
also 2018's Ukraine on Fire from Oliver Stone.
Yeah, that was a
really
good documentary.
That was a big one. Yeah.
That was good.
Shifting away from that domain, the 2010s also saw the rise of, I guess, maybe the continuation. Maybe this has kept Coast to Coast alive, but Missing 411. David Paulides and the stories of missing people from the national parks, which is still going. This is still going. In fact, Missing 411 has multiple parts to the documentary now. If you go on the spooky conspiracy side of YouTube, there are channels with millions of subscribers now covering Missing 411 type stuff separate from the original documentary. But Paulides,
I like that stuff too, because it feels almost nostalgic. I mean, it's creepy. It's more, I don't like that that's happening, but as far as just, it reminds me of, when I was a kid and you go to the library and you get the weird cryptid books. You start reading about Bigfoot and Loch Ness and aliens, alien abductions. All that reminds me of those times.
Yeah,
And
well, exactly.
it's
We
forgot.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that Missing 411 is really the last remaining popular like fun conspiracy domain. And like you said, I don't mean in the sense of it's fun to talk about people dying, but what we think of as like coast to coast type stuff, the entertaining sphere of so-called conspiracy radio and media. That is
right. The stuff that's not like you're gonna get murdered, right? And you're being poisoned. The stuff it's more like light. It's not directly affecting.
It's more
you.
entertainment, right? I mean, Coast to Coast was always essentially entertainment. Crazy people calling in about time traveling and this kind of stuff. And the remaining, I guess, keeper of the flame of that is the Missing 411 stuff, which probably dominates Coast to Coast. I haven't listened to that in years, but. Let's see. There's also things like Room 237. That was a big popular documentary in the 2010s. Jay Weidner, other people with their theories of The Shining. Very popular in the alternative media conspiracy sphere of things. Journeyman Pictures in the 2010s puts out quite a few documentaries. I remember watching documentaries on Ukraine when they had the coup, Maidan coup. I remember watching Journeyman Picture documentaries on Serbia, other places where there had been, Western covert action. Did you ever watch any Journeyman Picture stuff?
Yeah, I think so. Can you name a few?
Well, like if you were follows the 21st Century Wire, Patrick for years, for 10 years now, really has been every Sunday he's put up some documentary. So over the last 10 years, many of those documentaries were Journeyman Pictures.
They're shorter form though, right? They're like
they're like 20, 30-minute documentaries. A lot of them,
for sure. Okay, yeah, I've definitely seen quite a few of them.
Yeah.
Something that comes to mind too. As far as just documentaries, one of my favorite ones. I told you this earlier before the show. One of my favorite documentaries. It has nothing to do with conspiracy or anything. Was Werner Herzog's Grizzly Man.
Actually, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it because
not seen it.
I have not seen it, but when I was looking up, most popular documentaries of the last 3 decades, that one comes up in the top 5.
Yeah, I love it. It was just so well done. It's such a like touching, creepy. I don't know. It's great. It's one that sticks with you.
Yeah, I need to watch it. I guess it's kind of embarrassing. I haven't watched.
Yeah, I think you and Jamie would enjoy it. Jamie's she's probably seen it.
She has, yeah. I'm like the only person that I've never seen that, and I've never seen Breaking Bad. I'm like the one person that's never seen either of these.
Breaking Bad kind of sucks. It's not worth watching the whole.
On that topic though of 2010s, we also get this turn towards the new age, and so documentary films begin to take a pretty consistent. I mean, they'd always been kind of left, but even in the alt media sphere, we get, for example, the Thrive documentary. 2012. Thrive comes out. I looked it up. It's still got 17 million views on YouTube. This goofy new age documentary, kind of like 2012's version of Zeitgeist is, I guess, one way you could say what Thrive is. There was another one too that came out, and I forget the name of it, but around the mid 2010s, and it was about the occult, and it was something like the controllers or the something like that. That was really popular. Did you? Oh, and then one of the biggest normie documentaries around this time is What the Bleep Do We Know?
Oh man, I remember that.
Quantum consciousnness.
2003 or so.
Oh, is it that old? I thought it was 2010. Let me see.
Was it?
I thought it was late 2000s. Let's see.
I hated that doc. That was so annoying, man. The editing style, the narrator, the like yoga chick vibe, it was so bad. But there were skits in it too. Wasn't like half of it acted out.
It's you're right. It's actually 2004. I probably just didn't see it until I remember watching it in 2007 or 8. And yeah, it's the introducing people to quantum thought and quantum new age crap through documentary style. You get the same type of stuff with Zeitgeist and Thrive. So some of the documentaries start to go in this direction. Also at this time there was the popularity of, well, actually maybe even go back to the 90s. HBO has always kind of on the side, every now and then made these popular documentaries about all kinds of things, including cults. Did you ever see Newberg Sting? That's probably one of the most relevant of the HBO documentaries, because it's all about how they entrapped these sort of stupid Muslims. Everybody should watch Newberg Sting. It's a classic. It's one of those HBO conspiracy documentaries.
It's surprising that HBO would actually put that on television.
It was surprising. As we get into the 2010s in the normie sphere, there are this one could overlap a little bit. You've got Snowden, 2014, the Citizen 4 documentary. That's a big deal. Snowden was huge at this time. Everybody's talking about Snowden. The PRISM surveillance keyword system. Are you on the show, or are you just wandering away like Biden? It's like you're like Biden.
I saw something
just
shiny.
Wander off. Like.
Yeah, there's something shiny over there. Sorry.
Did you watch any of the WikiLeaks era stuff, the Snowden era documentaries of the 2010s?
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't remember. I couldn't name any of them. I couldn't name a single one. Do you remember any
Well,
in
Citizen
specific?
4 is the Snowden documentary from
No, I don't think I
2014.
saw that. With there was didn't Stone make a feature film about
Yes, he did.
Snowden?
The Messenger, or is that about the? That might be about the journalist. But there is a. You're right. There is a Snowden film by Oliver Stone. But did you watch any of the economics documentaries that got to be really popular after the 2008 housing collapse, like
Yes.
Inside Job and Too Big to Fail? Those were huge.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I remember the whole Occupy thing got really big in 2007, 8. That started on my campus at UC Santa Cruz, so that was
Oh,
a
wow.
weird time.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they took over the what's it called? I forget what office it was. But I think this was 2000. It was 2008, or was it 2009? But I remember because at the time I was also like there were all these documentaries like I don't think the major chemtrail one had come out yet. The What in the World Are They Spraying? That might have been like 2009. But there were some of these like Carnicom. You remember the Carnicom documentary about
Yes, Cliff
geoengineering?
Carnicom. Yeah, I was going to talk about some of those because those are 2010 era as well. Using the code language, this would be like, what on earth are they shooting into the atmosphere? And then the other one,
Yeah.
Sea Trails: The Secret War, which was a great documentary. Those still hold up, by the way.
Yeah, no, that's
Those were big
important,
in
and
this
I
period.
was really freaked out. In California at the time, it was a lot of that was happening, right? Like there was every day you would wake up and it would just be crisscross across the sky, and it was so blatant. And I was I was super freaked out about that. I remember during the Occupy stuff, all these kids had occupied the I forget what the building was called. It was like the staff building at UC Santa Cruz, and I remember going in there and just they're all camping in there and they think they're changing the world, but all they want is free stuff. They're just asking for
Right.
free
Yeah.
tuition, basically.
Yeah, I'll never
And
forget like the videos where Peter Schiff goes down on Occupy Wall Street and starts debating with them. Like gold. We need to go back to a gold-based currency, and he's arguing with like these wooks with dreads on the street. It was just a goofy time.
yeah, no, it was really bad. And I remember going in there and just yelling at them, like, "Look up at the sky! You guys are protesting this nonsense, and they're freaking spraying you with poison." And they all thought I was like a schizo person because I was like alone. It was after class, and I just like I'm so done with this. I was so mad. I was looking up at the sky, and I'd been like doing all this research and reading about all this stuff, and
Well, it's funny
I
because
yelling at them.
Occupy Wall Street was kind of the left answer to Tea Party, right? Remember the rise of the Tea
Yeah.
Party and the Rand Paul sphere, and there used to be Tea Party meetups and all of this, and
I
then
think
the
Tea Party
left
actually
had
came
their.
a year after that. Like the Occupy started in
It might have been
2000.
first. I thought Occupy was just supposed to be the
Yeah.
left.
I think the Tea Party, if I remember correctly, the Tea Party was in reaction to that. Like I think you're right, but it was the Tea Party was like there was nothing for the conservative types. There was just the lefties at Occupy. Find the
That's a
timeline.
good.
When
That's
did
a
Tea
really
Party
interesting
start?
question. Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think it was the other way around.
Because Tea Party was Obama. Obama came in
Yeah, so
after the
Tea Party,
Occupy.
you're right.
Occupy happened.
Tea Party is formed in opposition to Obama in 2010. So you're right. This is post Occupy. That's correct. And that's when you
And the
get.
Tea Party movement happened before 2010 too. Well, man, no, maybe it was 2010. But I think the movement itself started, and then there actually became some sort of a party, the Tea Party. But it was kind of boomer.
It was like a boomer libertarian, thing, and they didn't like the Republicans. That's actually probably that's the origins of today's critique of Rhino. When you hear that term Rhino, that's kind of coming out of that era of the Tea Party and trying to wake people up to the duopoly, the problems of the two-party system. But the reason
Tea Party was super boomer, and it was
Yes.
very it wasn't even Ron Paul stuff. It was like The Tea Party.
No. It started with Ron Paul, and then what happened was, I remember this vividly because I used to go to Tea Party stuff. Then what happened was the neocons started coming in, and it was like I forget who some of the first neocons were that united themselves to the Tea Party, and they started showing up and speaking, and they would get booed because they're like, we don't want neocons at our thing. And then Sarah Palin united herself to the Tea Party, and that's when everybody kind of felt like the Tea Party had been completely sort of co-opted.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, I perceive it as very boomer and naive, but I was just probably a little bit more extremist. And I mean, I wasn't a libertarian, but at least, at that time, I definitely resonated more with like the libertarian stuff. And then we kind of got involved with the Ron Paul thing and saw how that was railroaded by the Republican.
Yeah, I mean, people have to understand, like, at this time, the only thing that exists as conservative is, you've got, like, paleocon, Pat Buchanan types, and, like, Laura Ingraham and Coulter. And then you've got the Ron Paul, Rand Paul, Alex Jones, libertarian. And that was really your only options. There weren't, no such thing as these other right-wing, dissident right, or whatever. None of that existed.
Yeah. No, it didn't exist, and there wasn't a lot of the extreme. Like, the extreme people were libertarians that were kind of just orbiting the Ron Paul stuff, but then they all had their own fringe kind of niche ideas, but then kind of coalesced around Ron Paul because it was like, well, F the Fed, we got to get rid of that. Let's at least, unite for a common cause. But I think the infiltration and the shattering of that was pretty brutal, and then what they did to Ron Paul at the primary, it was obvious, and everybody lost hope in getting any sort of work done in the Republican Party until Trump came and picked up on that whole. I mean, by that time the wave was so big that normal people most normal people realized that there were huge problems.
I think you could make the argument that without Ron Paul and Alex Jones, there never would have been Trump.
There wouldn't. No, that would not have happened. There couldn't have been.
Yeah, you needed that decade and a half of preparing the groundswell for this kind of, bigger level change. And it's not perfect. It's not, but it's the first real shift in the right direction I think we've seen at the scale in forever. And it's just interesting that it's now in the era when documentaries don't exist anymore. They don't matter. Nobody cares about documentaries. I don't remember the last documentary I remember seeing that I thought was really good. I mean, I liked The Missing 411, but it was actually the Netflix documentary on Maury Terry's book, Ultimate Evil, and Son of Sam. I think most people thought that was a really good documentary series. Did you watch that? And you and I watched the Osho documentary. That was really good. But that's like 2018, 19.
Oh, yeah, that was great. The
Wild Country, that's it. Yeah.
That was really good.
That was good. Those were good 2010 era documentaries. Holy Hell was a really good.
Hey man, how you got the best list here? You're so prepped.
Yeah, I listed them all. I remember Holy Hell. That was a great documentary.
That was good.
The Source Family documentary is really good. So there's some good cult documentaries that were made in the 2010s.
Cult documentaries are always good. We need more cult documentaries, but they make like really corny ones now. Remember the last one we watched? It was about the
I watched that one about the dance cult, the 7M dance cult on TikTok. It was pretty wild.
The Twin Flame one was really bad.
Watched Twin Flame. Watched the whole Teal Swan.
Even the cult is boring these days.
Well, the Teal Swan documentary was okay. It was pretty good.
She's kind of boring too, though. It's just like, I'm kind of a bitch. I'm just this is my cult. I don't know.
Yeah, it could have been shorter than it was. It was a little too long. That Hulu documentary. Tell us about. I forgot this. This is a huge one that had a huge impact. 2010s. Going Clear. This was a massive blow to Scientology. Millions and millions of people saw this and saw how crazy Scientology is. I think that was a huge one. Remember that?
Yeah, I don't think I ever watched it. I might have seen it, but I
Oh man,
remember.
it's you
Yeah,
should watch it. It's especially where they go into like the compounds and what happens at the and that part's all crazy. Remember that?
doesn't he? Does he talk to what's his name? He tries. Does he try to interview Cavendish or whatever?
Uh,
What's the guy's name?
Richard Miscavige.
Miscavige.
Yeah.
Cavendish. What's Cavendish? Some talk show host or something?
No, I
What's
think
the-
everybody turns them down. No, nobody gives any. I mean, it's been. I haven't seen Going Clear since it came out, but I remember it being really. It's like this destroys Scientology.
That's Leah Remini. Leah Remini had something to do with
I
that?
think she had a role with that, and then that's what led to her.
I saw it.
She went on Rogan. Rogan was talking about
Yeah.
it a lot. That made it really popular. Oh, now going into the domain of propaganda, one of the worst disaster examples of propaganda. Of course, shout out to John Adams for reminding me of this, but it makes perfect sense because we've been talking about it in regard to the election. The Kony 2012 fiasco. Now, I watched all of this.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
I watched all this firsthand because this was one of the clearest examples of overt State Department propaganda documentary. And Alex covered it, in detail, exposing it at the time. And the guy that was behind this push, that Jason guy, had a mental breakdown in the midst of this push for the cover for AFRICOM to go in and take resources. This whole point of the Kony fiasco. This was basically pushed by a lot of evangelical groups. I remember on my university campus, I remember ripping down all the Kony posters that the evangelical groups are putting up. So if you guys are wondering, 12 years later, that was me. I was the one pulling down all the Kony posters every night as you put them up. And it made me mad because the evangelical groups were all 100% just blindly supporting the idea that we need to go in with the military to find Joseph Kony. And I just thought how stupid all this was. This really woke me up to a lot of the way NGOs and the way that the evangelical sphere especially can be duped by the Pentagon, the State Department, as really pushing soft power in their idiocy. As to be so stupid and naive as to think that suddenly the U.S. government cares about finding this random warlord suddenly in 2012, as if it's not a cover for AFRICOM, right, which is Pentagon directives and operations to find the resources in Africa. That was what it was all about. And again, but to come back to the main point of the documentary was being pushed heavily everywhere, especially on universities and by Christians. Christian evangelical groups were pushing this Kony 2012 nonsense like massively because the Pentagon told them to. And Alex was one of the key figures really trying to bust open this propaganda. And he didn't even have to, because the main guy that was the frontispiece for all this young guy named Jason, something that was kind of doing the media push and making the documentary, had a gigantic public mental breakdown, I think in LA or at San Francisco, stripped down naked and ran out into public and had a mental breakdown. Maybe he was on shrooms, something like that. And that effectively destroyed the entire Kony 2012 PSYOP. It was pretty wild to watch that happen.
Sounds pretty base.
Did you remember that, the Jason guy?
So, for sure, I remember that. I never watched the documentary. I was thinking, why is this everywhere? Why is everyone telling me to watch this stupid documentary? And because everyone's telling me to watch this, there's no way I'm watching it. So I just kind of waited it out, and I was like, okay, yeah, it was a psyop, of course.
And then coming up into more modern times, in recent years, I want to say this is about 2019 to maybe 2020, the infamous Black Hebrew Israelite documentary going around that all of the black bros and NFL and rap people and NBA guys are pushing, which causes a huge stir because it claims, of course, that blacks are the true Israelites. It becomes labeled an anti-Semitic documentary, and whoever that basketball, remember when the NBA guy shared it and he had to apologize because he shared the BHI documentary, one of the big NBA people.
Kyrie Irving?
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that was before Kanye. I remember that. I mean, Kanye was pretty upset about that. He kept talking about, look what they did to Kyrie. They did to Kyrie. And then there was also around the same time, wasn't it? I don't. It's not. What is that guy's name? I want to say Aaron Carter, but it's not Aaron Carter. Like it's not Lil Bow Wow, but it was like that one of those young rapper guys. That little like a little black guy
Yeah.
on his podcast. He said something about the Chosens and um who was it? They made him publicly apologize, and he did. Um, anyways, this rapper on his podcast,
right,
said the same thing.
And Nick Cannon, remember there was the
Nick Cannon, that's who it is.
Nick
Cannon, like we was the Jews, we's the real Jews, and then I think he tried to double down a little bit and say, "Nah, I ain't apologizing." And then a few weeks later, he's like, "I'm here with Rabbi Shmuley. He's so cool. I'm here with Rabbi Shmuley to promote his lovely business." He did like a whole apology tour and like said, "What I said was so horrible. I can't believe it. I'm so sorry. I love the real Hebrews."
Yeah, and
not one.
the funny thing is that this is, like you said, it goes back earlier. I think the documentary is a little bit older because this Black Hebrew Israelite stuff had in some way made its way over to Ye in some degree, Ice Cube, and a lot of the other popular famous black people had sort of begun.
I talk about this, they were those communities. That's kind of like their thing. They've had their own little version of. It's actually it's more long lasting and more useful, it seems, than even the serpent seed stuff. It's basically the same thing. It's the serpent seed, white identity stuff, but for black dudes. And that's been around for a while. I mean, it goes back like Nation of Islam, the 5% Nation, which is kind of this offshoot of Nation of Islam stuff.
Yes.
They all have similar ideologies and similar structures to their organizations, and then really similar fruits. They kind of yield similar fruits.
And this ties into also, I believe, even the domain of like Jay-Z and the whole idea of like Hova and that period. Jay-Z had gotten into and been influenced by Nation of Islam stuff. So like Farrakhan stuff at that point.
I think it was even more 5% type stuff probably too.
Isn't that part of Nation of Islam? That's the business side of
it. It's like this weird offshoot. It'd be fun to do a stream just on all that stuff, because I mean the Wu-Tang guys are really into the same stuff. In New York, it's really big.
Point.
Really
right.
big in the East Coast, really big in New York, and among like it in the 70s, a lot of these kind of gang guys and like, community organizer types were real into that stuff. Like Black Panther types,
right,
flirted with some of those ideology. It really just comes down to race idolatry, right? Like,
well, but there's a parallel sphere of black conspiracy that's kind of parallel with all the alt media, libertarian white people conspiracy domain. There is also there's this adjacent like black conspiracy stuff the whole time too, which has a few characters putting out, documentaries. Professor Griff obviously is on part of that.
Even Professor Griff and Cannabis, that guy, he had like this whole album called Melatonin Magic. But a
lot of the rappers,
it's also they get all obsessed with like melanin is a magical substance.
Right.
Melanin is the fabric of the universe. The
exactly.
whole cosmos is all just built on melanin. And the white man is so like, you freaking punk ass whiteys, useless honkies. You don't even have melanin as much as the real Hebes have, and because of that, you are worth less. You have no psychic abilities. You can't even be out in the sun for long.
But I was created by Yakub, so I can thank Yakub for making me.
Y'all gonna be my slaves. You ain't even white. You red. You the seed of the serpent.
Oh, speaking of that parallel, non-libertarian white people conspiracy domain, there's also the less known and less tapped sphere of Islamic conspiracy theory, particularly in the late 2000s. Do you remember The Arrivals? That series was very popular on YouTube, millions of views, and it was just a whole bunch of, it was like Muslim conspiracy theory videos about the
The
jinn,
Dajjal.
the Dajjal and the jinn in music videos and pop culture. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that was around the same time as all the synchro mysticism
Yep.
videos were coming out. So people would that was another fun time on the internet conspiracy world, the synchro mysticism stuff where it's like they'd take all these clips from G.I. Joe and then find,
Yes.
from September the day number 11 of September from the 2001, they would get the videos from that and then show how, well, look at this exact angle on this news clip, and then
Yeah.
they would just be so schizo. But some of the connections that they would make, it was fun to watch.
Yeah,
It was
right.
it was like a puzzle that you're watching these weird synchro mysticism videos. But yeah, that was probably made by a bunch of feds or stoners.
Yeah.
Or both. Feds, stoners.
Now, a couple I left out, I forgot, apologize. One of the more obvious ones I should have remembered and known right away is, this is actually an early 2000s documentary. I didn't watch it until about 2010 or 11, but I came across it because of doing Esoteric Hollywood, and that is the documentary Operation Hollywood, about the Pentagon's role in Hollywood. It's a very, very normie, very, kind of left, but it's still got some good insights and information. I did think that more recently the Jean Le Carré documentary was pretty good. That had some pretty good insights into espionage, and then the other documentary in the espionage sphere that's really good of recent times is the William Colby documentary that actually FDA told me to watch. If you've never seen the William Colby doc, it's made by his son. Obviously he's dead, but that's a really, really good espionage documentary. I recommend it. It's called The Man Nobody Knew: In Search of My Father. That's a great documentary. And the John Le Carré documentary that I think Apple TV did is a really good documentary of recent note. But other than that, that's essentially, for me, everything I can think of in terms of, documentaries that I watched and that I recall. And the ones that really stand out aren't the ones you might think. The ones that stick out in my mind as really kind of changing my mind on issues was certainly, Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove convinced me of the reality of the power elite meeting in secret meetings and doing weird stuff. Franklin Coverup and Ted Gunderson talks, really kind of solidified for me the role of SRA, that kind of stuff. Obviously, Loose Change and Fabled Enemies played a big role. Corbett on OKC and Noble Lie were big ones in my mind. Minds of Men, Mirage Men, Lightbulb Conspiracies, Open Secret were big ones. But that's about it. I mean, there's value in a lot of these other ones, but for me, those are the ones that really stick out as kind of being pivotal, things that kind of change my mind on topics.
Yeah, great list there, man. That's a great topic. I'm glad you suggested it, man.
Well, I thought about it. Actually, John Adams suggested we do a podcast on it, so shout out to John because he kind of had the idea. But also, I forgot, guys, if you do want to watch the documentary, the one documentary I am in, it is Sean Stone's documentary with me and Oliver Stone and others called Hollywood DC. I will put that link right there. This is from some years ago, maybe 2017, I think is when that came out. But it's a good documentary. If you haven't seen it, it kind of goes over the base. It's a better version of Operation Hollywood. But we got a few super chats. Anything that you want to leave us with, Tristan, in terms of tell us about, lastly, Game Changers. I remember you doing a great critique of this when this came out. What is that all about?
Oh yeah, well there were a lot of these like vegan propaganda documentaries that came out around this time, but the one that got the most funded was, we were talking about James Cameron earlier, and he made all those weird documentaries, and he sorry. Yeah. He funded and made this documentary called Game Changers, which was all about how if you go vegan, your pee is going to work better and you'll get more harder boners, and then you'll have you'll just become this super jacked uber athlete. And yeah, it was one of the corniest documentaries you'll ever see. But there's tons of momentum behind this. It was at a time when a lot of the people in the vegan activist movement on
Right.
YouTube were getting a lot of attention, right? And they were doing street theater and terrorizing small family farms and stuff. So guys like Earthling Ed, and there were this whole network of vegan influencers, and they're all funded by, and I exposed this years ago, these people hate me too. So I stopped interacting with any of these people because their movement basically fizzled out after the Game Changers came out. Nobody cares about veganism anymore. It's not even a thing. These people have become irrelevant culturally, but at the time, as far as YouTube goes, they were getting a lot of attention, and they would try to debate people and, convince them to go vegan. And, some people were dumb enough to try the things that they suggested to them, and malnourish themselves on a vegan diet. But Game Changers was James Cameron. It was his foray into activism, and he actually bought this huge compound over in New Zealand and wanted to turn it into some like vegan paradise or something. I think it ended up falling apart. I mean, he might have sold it. It's weird. A lot of the elite are buying land in New Zealand. I don't know what it is about New Zealand, but a lot of them are kind of hedging their bets on owning some land in New Zealand and building compounds there. But it turns out that James Cameron also, when he was promoting this documentary about, well, stop eating meat and eat vegan food. Well, the main vegan food that he wants to promote is pea protein powder, pea protein isolate. So, it's not urine pea, but like peas is the little green things. So he bought shares in, or maybe I think it might have been half of the shares in like the biggest pea protein isolate production facility in North America, or perhaps the world, and that was in Canada. So he had a vested interest in promoting this stuff. Well, it turns out that pea protein stuff was killing a bunch of dogs. They put in a lot of dog kibble, and they were getting kidney failure and problems with their blood, like blood clotting type stuff. So yeah, it ended up being a real failure in the dog food world, because they were saying, well, you just transition your pets, all the cat moms, and you guys got to be vegan cat moms, and that's going to save the planet, and the weather's not going to change if you do that, and all the good things will happen, and if you don't, then all the bad things are going to happen with climate change, and the climate won't stop changing, and oh, aren't you scared the polar bears aren't going to be able to swim if they're stuck on an iceberg, and it's because of you, because you eat meat. So this the documentary was horrible. It was completely, it's actually funny to watch because it's such stupid propaganda. Like, they bring these young guys, these kind of, I don't know if I forget if they're college level athletes or if they were NFL guys, and they bring them to this doctor, and he starts telling them, well, vegan diet, you get more frequent and harder erections. So they like strap a device to their weens at night, and they measure how like the hardness of their peens while they're sleeping.
I remember you talking about this now when you were making fun of the documentary.
God.
I remember this now.
Dude, it was the stupidest thing. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of
This
stuff.
brings back like this is like 2018, 2019 era Tristan streams, because I remember I listened to all those. I remember you covering all those.
That was good. Those are good times. Those are a good era. Like debating vegan gains and all those idiots.
My question is, like, so I know you've been busy with other stuff, but have you caught up on or checked in on the vegan sphere of YouTube and the internet? And it seems I've
not checked in on them that often, but I follow a lot of them on like Instagram, but I don't get into my YouTube feed anymore. I don't engage with them as far as.
But what I'm wondering is, do you think all of that propaganda that they were rolling out so hard from 2016 to 2022, I mean, has it essentially failed, or do you think they're still kind of on the rise?
Yeah, no, I think it's completely failed. They're being funded a lot. The big funder of all these channels funds like Plant-Based News. Likely the funder behind the major donor behind guys like Anonymous, Voice for the Voiceless. There's this group of vegan dorks who took the Anonymous aesthetics and the Guy Fawkes mask, and they go and they stand and they hold like slaughterhouse footage, and then they get one of their guys, like they just stand there still and they don't say anything. They just stand there like statues and hold a computer, and it shows the poor animals being killed at slaughterhouses. And then, they do this in cities where people are completely disconnected from their food supply and have no idea, like, what it entails to grow food, produce food. So, people were raised on Disney movies and Bambi's, anthropomorphizing animals and thinking
Right.
that they're all just like your best friends. And they they'll have somebody try to convince them and debate people in the street, and then they'll harvest clips from that and put it online. But if you look at these channels and these videos now, it's just an echo chamber. Maybe they would say the same thing about uh, us, but it's just created this really tight echo chamber where they're constantly coping with each other, and the language, and they're still memeing about stuff that we were making fun of them for in
Yeah.
2018, 2019. They're still a lot of these people are still obsessively they're still like debating us in their minds. Like, they're
You're
still
right.
like trying to pwn us and
Well, I remember at one
and
point, yeah, like you would see Ask Yourself and Vegan Gains all over YouTube. Like everywhere you went, they're debating here, they're over here, they're with Stefan Molyneux debating, they're over here debating, and Vegan Gains over, and it seems like no one cares about any of these people anymore.
No, I don't think I mean, I haven't seen a Gains video in forever. I think he's just super depressed and obese and miserable. His wife is like totally trans now or something. I don't know. These people are, sadly, a lot of these people are really mentally ill, and they're living they're living out their little lifestyle, and it's just exacerbating the problem of the mental illness. Chicken or egg scenario, where it's like, did the nutritional
Yeah,
deficiency make you mentally ill, or did your mental illness drive you to making a religion out of chronic nutritional deficiency? And yeah, no, the hard part about engaging with vegans is they mass flag, and they are engaged in all the gay ops tactics. So it's just not it's best to not engage with them. They get your channel completely shadow banned through just mass
yeah.
flagging and stuff like that.
Well,
So, and they're just
checking in on
the same.
Vegan Gains. He has a channel that's twice or bigger than mine, and he gets the same amount of views on his videos, and can't even pull 200 on a live stream. So, because he's live streaming right now. He's live streaming right now. He's got 198 on a live stream.
He's live right now.
Yeah.
Let's go watch him.
I can't play video when I got a guest on Collab Cam, but I am going to have to end it pretty quick here because we got to go get FDA from the airport. But we got some super chats.
I was thinking we should have ended it like before it even started. But yeah, that's fine.
I was thinking that having any connection to you was a bad idea before I even met. It's called quantum.
You're toxic.
It's called quantum toxicity. There's quantum toxicity that you have where people know before they even know you that they shouldn't. So it's called quantum toxic.
Yeah. Well, you have to have me on because I have so much blackmail on you, and I've got pictures of you.
You got a picture of me in my vegan
We'll
face.
just say that
My vegan
you don't want to see. Yeah, now Jay's squirming in his seat. I'll just say one word. Jay will know what I'm talking about.
It's
and
me with Vegan Gains and my vegan gay phase. Me and Vegan Gains.
If Jay doesn't cooperate, the audience might know about his quantum foam. That's what I'll say. The audience will.
Maverick Jones, $3. I gotta hurry up. Did you guys ever watch Europa: The Last Battle? I have not. Is that a movie or a documentary?
Well, yeah. Remember the greatest story never told? That was another really big one. 2017 or 18.
Is that a health one? What's that about?
No, the greatest story never told. That was the funny mustache man is my new internet dad face.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that was going around popular in the 2010s. Yes.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's an alternative history, revisionist history about World War II and pre-World War II.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Hitting
that
review.
Exactly, glowy review. Hit that all the day. $3. You should get Immortal Technique on. He's a cool guy. I haven't thought about.
No, he's not actually cool anymore. He's actually unhinged weirdo.
Oh, really? Like what? In what? Like how?
Just like Trump derangement syndrome, and
he hates
he
Trump.
He goes on Instagram Live and just like rants and yells at people, and he's kind of a boomer.
Kristen, $20. Very cool, chill stream. Love the memories and the stories of these real life conspiracy truths. Exactly. Matthew Sober, $20. I'm 21, I put a good amount of money into Bitcoin a few months ago. Now I want to commit harder. Should I wait for a dip to get in or ASAP? Yeah, it's hard to say because we're moving into new ATH territory. So if we pop to 150-200 in the next 6 months, then what that means is that the new low will be the 60 tier. So if you're looking to get back into it at the 60-ish tier, that's probably not going to happen until we hit the next pop off high, and then whenever the next crash is. And I can't tell you when the next crash is. So I don't know whether it's better to wait or DCA. I can't tell you that. Dave, $10. Love you guys. Have you seen Tom Hanks written and directed film, That Thing You Do? I have seen that. It's esoteric. It has
that movie. I remember that.
I didn't know Tom Hanks did that.
Yeah, it's a music industry type thing, right? It has esoteric themes.
Thing you do, breaking my heart into a million pieces.
Yes, Jamie made me watch it actually. So I have BR Shadow, $3. What's the main consequences of getting initiated into something like theosophy? Spiritual delusion. Tonelope, $23. Tristan, I live near the aforementioned base that you said in regard to UCSC. I was asked to go view those spheres in 1993. I discounted the notion that it could be real. I saw those red spheres moving hypersonically across the horizon and hiding amongst stars near Davenport.
That's crazy. That's funny. Yeah, I saw some of that stuff too. I saw a weird experimental craft there, and then also those like one time one of those triangle things. This triangle craft actually came right over during the middle of it flew over Santa Cruz in the middle of a fireworks display. I don't think it was 4th of July, but it could have been 4th of July. And I took I didn't have the camera on a tripod, but I took a long exposure picture of it because it was coming off way out off the horizon, like over the bay, and then just flew right over us. When it was kind of amazing because it was totally quiet, and it was triangular in shape and had this big orb in the middle of it, and then lights on each point, and it was just dark, and it just flew right.
Cool story, bro, but we gotta hurry. I told you this. You're just basically hurting FDA every time you talk. I want you to know that. Anon, $10. Glory to Jesus Christ, now and ever unto ages of ages. Thank you. Joe Anon, $5. What do you think about the American Orthodox film trailer? I've not yet seen it, but we'll check it out. How do you see Orthodox films influencing culture? Well, again, documentaries are only going to go so far, so I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just not the era, unfortunately, of documentaries anymore. Gary, $200. Thank you so much. Fat Super Chat. Thank you, Jay, for these BTC predictions. It is good to see the stunning and brave Tristana back on the stream. Absolutely. We're glad to have beautiful E-Diva Tristana here. Maverick Jones, do research into the relationship of the John Birch Society and Alex. Alex has talked about General Benton K. Parton and early John Birch people for decades. We had a dinner with Alex and talked about it, so I'm familiar with that. But thank you. Storm the Cat, $10. Salad Fingers is peak 2000s internet. I don't know what that is. Let's see. We did that one. Backseat Sauce Man, $10. Yakub did Kony 2012. Amen to that. Guys, remember to head on over to chalk.com. Use the promo code J40 to get 40% off all those great products. The best in adaptogens, the best in supplementation that you can get on the market. If you want a better discount, use the promo code JAY44LIFE, J44LIFE, to get 44% off all those great products over at chalk.com, CHOQ.com. The link is in the show description. Be sure and follow Tristan over on his channel, Tristan Haggard. It is linked in the show description, and it will be linked after the show in the title description. But yes, his channel is linked. And tomorrow is our Icon Conference. There is still the possibility, if you can make it, if you're in the Florida area, if you want to come to our conference, there are still open seats. And so you can get tickets right here. Me, FDA, Father Theodore, and Father Vladimir talking tomorrow on Icons. Hey, Tristan, thank you so much for talking about documentaries and doing this retrospective.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on, Mr. J. Dyer. J. Dyer. Thank you for unmuting me. Reminding me to unmute always. Sometimes I just forget to unmute, and then I just hear this beautiful voice. I gotta unmute, dude. Unmute, dude. But could you tell Jamie to get you a coffee, and then
Yep.
yeah,
I'll see you soon.
Yeah, well, we got to go get FDA. So thank you for coming on, man.
Jamie, can you get a coffee?
Great
Jamie?
show.